Hey, what is going on, guys? Hope you're having a great Sunday. Welcome to the AV Experience. My voice is a little hoarse, but we're going to have a lot of fun tonight. We've got Stop the FOMO in the house. FOMO, it's been a while. Good to see you, brother.
I'm having fun already, man.
He's already ranting backstage, man. We're
I
having a
know,
good
I'm
time.
ranting and you haven't even clicked play yet.
Oh, for sure, man. Jonathan, good to see you. Ryan, what's happening, fellas?
I'm glad to be home from where were we? Utah.
Utah, man. Yeah.
That was a lot of fun, but I got home and I was like, man, I feel pretty good. And then the next day, I'm like, I hurt. I
Yeah.
hurt, but it was a lot of fun. I
You got
really enjoyed that.
snowboard or ski?
I ski. Michael
Yeah. The real
snowboard.
guy's snowboard.
Oh, whatever.
But in all fairness, I don't I get tired quicker on the dang snowboard, man. Ryan's just zooming and zooming and zooming. I'm like catching my breath, going, "Dang, this is rough."
To your defense, you were sick.
I was, yeah. Still, I'm sick, but I'm here. But yeah, man, we had a blast over there. Claude is actually in the chat. Good to see you, Claude.
Hey,
Claude and
Claude,
Wendy.
it's been a while.
What's
Yep.
Claude's name?
Bethea.
Oh, okay. I haven't
Claude
seen him yet.
Bethea. Yep. So he's over in the chat. So good to see you, buddy. Um, but yeah, we're gonna have a great time tonight. We're talking TVs. We're talking calibrated TVs.
Oh, yeah.
Should
And
you calibrate?
uncalibrated TVs.
And,
What's that?
well, maybe we should talk uncalibrated TVs.
Yeah, uncalibrated TVs. There's some drama there, but we're gonna have some fun. We're gonna talk about maybe in your home, but
Hmm.
also at Mwave. We've made some decisions, and we're gonna share that with you. We'll give you some updates on Ryan's home theater, and if you got a question, leave it in the chat. Of course, super chats get first priority, but definitely not necessary. So drop those in the chat whenever you're ready. So I'm gonna let you guys do a lot of the talking tonight because, as you can tell, my voice is it just kind of comes and goes. It
Shit's an
sounds like I'm going through
excuse.
puberty again, man. I hate
Uh,
that.
yeah, don't get me started. Otherwise, I won't stop talking.
That's all good, man. But we're
So
gonna have
the
some fun.
the initial question was, I think, should we do calibrated or uncalibrated TVs? We announced that we were going to do uncalibrated, and then some people got a
A little heated.
A
little
little
upset.
heated, a little disappointed.
Yeah. So we decided, hey, we're going to bring on FOMO
Hmm.
because we want to make sure that you don't have any fear of missing out if they're uncalibrated or they're
Or rather,
uncalibrated.
you have someone to throw under the bus because it was my decision to go uncalibrated. Just so everyone knows, right? Uh, Ryan would like. He's like, you know what? Shouldn't we do calibrated? Like, you know what? I don't think we should. And he goes, okay, let's not do calibrated this year. And unlike last year, so just to compare, last year's M Wave, Jason Dustle calibrated all the TVs, right? And so what you saw last year were all the TVs calibrated. And then this year, I said, you know, the intent originally was to do it uncalibrated. So it's quite surprising to me when Brian and I walked in. Wait, they're all calibrated. Jason, what are you doing here? Hey guys, I'm here to calibrate. It's like, oh, right. And then this year I said, okay, let's do it the way I envisioned it, which is out of the box, uncalibrated. However, Ryan brought up a good point, which is let's have at least a reference monitor of some sort, right? Just so
Yes.
they can see what they're missing. I go, that fair enough. I think that actually works very well because last year we didn't have access to reference anyway. And if this year we didn't, we would have calibrated one TV that calibrates well and then have that one calibrated. And but there is definitely a purpose in not calibrating the TVs. And this is not clickbait because the title is very clear. Calibrated TV reviews, is it useful or misleading? And the assumption, so we'll get rolling here. Normally, I like to warm up, but I think this is important to understand. What is the objective you're trying to get out of the TV review? So whether it's M Wave, whether it's the shootout, right? Each has an objective, and the M Wave objective, the Midwest AV experience, if you're not familiar with it, is it's not a shootout, right? It is not intended to demonstrate this TV is clearly better than that TV. My goal is at M Wave to show you, okay, these TVs out of the box. We'll play with the settings, we'll show you what they do, and we'll compare them against each other out of the box, which is exactly how consumers look at the TVs. And this is why calibrated TV reviews can be misleading. If you look at ratings or any of our reviews, once it's calibrated, right, you'll notice, wow, these TVs calibrate to like 97% accuracy, 98%, like delta less than 1%, delta 0.5%, all of them, right? all of these TVs over $1,000, right? Good TVs calibrate really well. That doesn't tell you anything because here is the part that's misleading. If you get, let's say, an El Cheapo TV, a $700 TV, and then you do a review and it's calibrated and it looks amazing, that $700 TV is never going to get calibrated. And so the misleading part is the consumer who reads that review and sees how amazing it is, short of spending another $400 to calibrate it, it is not going to look anything like that out of the box because it the difference between a $700 TV that's uncalibrated and one that's calibrated is quite stark. Now, as you go up the pricing range, 8, 9, 2,000, 3,000, they actually come out of the box a little bit more accurate. Not fully accurate, but again, I'm going to use ratings, rtings.com. Before calibration, the $2,000 TVs are consistently above 80% accuracy. And then after calibration, they're like 94%, all of them, right? But before calibration, they're all in the 80s. If you go below $700, they're all in the 70s, possibly worse. And at the end of the day, you could calibrate any TV, it's going to look accurate, but the goal isn't for you guys, as a reviewer, I have two objectives. One is TV recommendations, which is separate and apart from which is the technically superior TV. And when you want to go with technical superiority, you have to calibrate to a standard. And then once it's calibrated, you pick content that separates the best TV, content you would never watch. Spears and Munsell, right? No one watches Spears and Munsell, or literally 5-second scenes from movies that we all know and love, 1917, Pan, Mad Max. I mean, there's so many of these movies, but they're literally just 5-second snippets from the entire movie that's very difficult to resolve, whether it's dynamic range on the upper end or on the lower end. And again, this is why it's misleading. Until you calibrate it, put it in those conditions in a completely dark room, then you separate the TVs, and then suddenly one TV is better. The misleading part is that TV might be better in that condition, but the TVs that didn't come close in those conditions, in a bright room, watching what you're watching, indistinguishable, especially if they're uncalibrated as well. And this is something that I want M-Wave to be different from these shootouts because the perfect example is the last shootout, right? The Sony A95L. It won, it's the king of TVs, but lots of issues. One, Dolby Vision is inaccurate. It's lifted. It needs a firmware update. You cannot calibrate that out. But that was never mentioned in very few reviewers mention that because they think, oh, Dolby Vision, that's what it looks like. What do I know? And the issue is if you have to calibrate a TV to make it look good, I think that misleads the consumer who doesn't plan to calibrate his TV. Now, if you are a consumer who plans to calibrate your TVs, then you need to watch a review that compares all TVs calibrated. Now, on my reviews, all of my TVs are calibrated, but I also try to show the TV before they're calibrated to compare it to my calibrated TVs just to see if there's a big difference, right? And some TVs don't calibrate well at all. TCL is one of them. It's all over the place, right? It's panel lottery. Sometimes out of the box, you calibrate it, doesn't matter. It still looks terrible. The colors are off for whatever reason, and sometimes it calibrates really well. Whereas other TVs, consistently, they will calibrate well. Sony, LG, to name a few, and now Samsung out of the box is pretty accurate. I mean, calibration helps a little bit. But at M-Wave, what our hope is, look, you have a reference monitor here, so you know what a good calibrated TV looks like, and then you have all these TVs in filmmaker mode, out of filmmaker mode. This is what you can expect out of the box. If you don't like that, it will easily calibrate to look just like that reference monitor, right? And if you like what you see, you don't have to calibrate it. But if I have all the TVs calibrated, I cannot give you that option because now you're going to say to me, do I have to calibrate it to make it look like this? And I have to say yes, because I don't know what it looks like uncalibrated. And a lot of people say, well, why don't you have two settings, calibrated, uncalibrated? Unfortunately, not all TVs make that easy to do. It's just easier to say, look, here's your reference monitor. And all these TVs have been chosen because, first of all, they're not cheap. Even at M-Wave, they're like at least $1,000 and above. They'll all calibrate well. I fully believe that today, if you buy a TV that's $1,000 and up, it's going to calibrate fine. Hopefully TCL addresses their issue this year. But our goal is to let you see three things, right? Size. Don't you want to see what a 98-inch TV looks like? Forget the calibration part. this is 98 inches. Is it bright enough for you? How's the reflection handling? And you're streaming content. So we're going to put out streaming content. This is what you're going to look at. And if you want to calibrate it, go ahead. But the reason you buy this TV because it's large, right? And then you compare it to a slightly smaller OLED, 83 inch maybe. How does that look? Look at the infinite contrast and compare the two. And if you put the 98 inch in filmmaker mode, the 83 inch OLED in filmmaker mode, they'll be close enough and you'll see slight differences. You know what? I like how the Sony comes out of the box. There you go. They answer your question. Get the Sony out of the box that looks like that. This 98-inch TCL, Hisense, Samsung out of the box will look like that more often than not. I know it's panel lottery, but still. So M-Wave is for the consumer buyer. It's not meant to be a critical comparison, but we want to treat every review like a critical
I mean, would you
comparison.
say that it's not a critical comparison, but TVs now are close enough that it's almost you're having to nitpick at that point, especially when they're all calibrated? I mean, you're really trying to and having to really dig deep to find faults.
Yes, absolutely. And well, just dig deep to find faults. That's why I have to use Spears and Munsell. Without the Spears and Munsell disc, it's very hard to find fault with the TV. Now, some TVs it's easy because you know exactly what the weaknesses are. Like I'm going to use TCL again because their motion settings are very raw. They don't have Sony's, LG's, or even Samsung's motion settings to play with. It's either this, or this. It's one of those three. You either like it or you don't. You either like soap opera or you're okay with stutter. It's very hard to get something in between, but at least you know what you're getting. And it's not hard to put out content that will show that motion issues on a TCL. But skin tones, right? Skin tones out of the box, it is what it is. If you calibrate it, it should get better. But in filmmaker mode, most TVs are doing a pretty good job with skin tones, I have to say. Most. There are exceptions, but I've seen the Samsung last year's S90C, S95C, and the G3, and the Sony A95L and A95K calibrated after calibration. Side by side, you'll see a difference. But if I was just to walk in and watch the same scene without it side by side, I'd be like, wow, this actually looks pretty good. And so that to your point, it's close enough that they're within 5% of each other. A lot of people won't complain, short of, I know there are calibrators out there. I see you all. You guys are so used to seeing skin tones in a certain way with your favorite material. You'll see the difference. But most consumers, if it looks natural, that's good enough for them. Like, how many people do we know that look at a calibrated TV? Wait, this D65 looks way too warm. I thought white looks a certain way. And I know many calibrators tell me, yeah, every time a customer tells me, I want another setting where the white looks a little bit more white, like more blue, right? And so they have that setting that looks like white to them. They don't like D65. And because
Subjective white.
it's very subjective white. And so, they have to give them the few, like on a Sony, you have the few modes that you could play with that they can choose from. And ultimately, they end up just with bright room mode because they're in a bright room. And that's another thing. If you calibrate a TV to a dark room, so all of my reviews, calibrated TVs in a dark room, but that in your room will be too dark. So suddenly you're going to use ISF bright, Dolby Vision bright, or on an LG, it's Cinema Home, right? That throws calibration out the window. If you're doing that, a little oversaturated, a little brighter than normal, right? And the blacks are slightly lifted so you can see your shadow detail because you're in a bright room. Then it goes to the second point, which is what's the point of calibrating if I know you're going to watch TV in a bright room where everything's a little off? And so at the end of the day, I think it ends up being a wash where your calibration dollar doesn't really get you what you think you're getting. But critical viewers like you guys, you have a dedicated home theater. It's a man cave. Sure, absolutely. Why not? This is why in M-Wave, we won't calibrate the TVs, but we'll have a reference monitor so you guys can see how off it is. Is it important to you get it calibrated? And if you want it calibrated, it'll get there. And it's that 0.1% of the audience that says, well, how close can it get? I want the TV that gets the closest. Well, that's not M-Wave. That's a real shootout.
So something that I want people to think about that are in chat is a lot of people, when they calibrate a TV and they move from like before the calibration to after the calibration, you really don't have a good way to compare post result back to how the TV was.
Right.
And so I challenge a lot of you that say, hey, there was a huge difference, to remember, and maybe there was, depending on the mode that you were looking at, that a lot of that is subjective, right? So yes, there can be, like, you may notice that things are not as green or blue or yellow or whatever the TV was skewing, but then you have to ask yourself, did I really care that few percentage points difference before until I saw the difference? So you've got to decide, and I'm not saying calibration is bad, but you got to decide, like I always say, how far do you want to chase the rabbit, right? How far are you willing to go and spend in order to get those few extra percentage points? And if you don't ever do the direct A/B comparison with calibrated versus uncalibrated, that is what we're doing at M-Wave versus the mastering monitor with the uncalibrated TVs. Does it really matter? If the picture looks great for you, doesn't matter. How close is good enough?
And
One
to
thing
your,
that
no,
I was
go
just
ahead, Michael.
one thing that I've seen a lot is usually we're using what we call torture tests. You know, these are just really extreme cases, like you said, from Spears and Munsell. And we're showing those tests. And a lot of times that is pretty obvious when you're comparing one TV to another or one projector to another. Um, but the reality is, most of us aren't watching torture tests. We're watching Mad Max. We're watching Lucy. We're watching, you know, The Greatest Showman, real world content where that's changing constantly throughout the movie. And probably most of us in something like that, we're not going to notice as big of a difference. And the other thing is, a lot of times you don't know what you have until you put it like literally side by side to something else and how it really compares. And so
Yeah.
there is that. Most people don't have that option. We provide that option at M-Wave because we want you to see side by side comparisons. Some people are going to come into yours and Brian's room and we're going to look at that and go, man, out of the box, that TV looks better than this one. And they're going to make a buying decision based off of just that, what they see in real world content. So we're just trying to think outside the box this year. Is it more beneficial to have calibrated TVs, or is it better to have uncalibrated TVs and have a reference monitor of what that calibration should look like? And then you can visually see how much deviation is there in these colors or in the contrast and so forth.
Yeah. And well, to that point, and so this comment is also similar to what we're talking about. When they say explain how far they deviate from reference, right? Hey, thanks, high def news. So it's one thing when you have it side by side, right? You have a reference and
Mhm.
out of the box, and you could see the difference. But if I said to you, it's 5%, 3%, 1%, 0.3%, the percentages make no sense to you.
Yeah, what does
You
that
have,
mean?
right. And so even if, so I'm going to use ratings, and I love ratings.com. It's nothing against them, but they're very clear, right? They say, okay, less than 3%, not noticeable, over 3%. I get all of that, but then there's no side by side. Like, is it
Well,
skin tones I'm going to
and
notice
less
this?
than 3% or over, less noticeable to who?
Uh,
I mean, it's
exactly.
all subjective. So whether it's one way or the other, I mean, saying things like that with how the human eye works and how we perceive things and all this in our experiences, there's so many variables to say that, oh, you're not going to notice it if it's under 3%. Well, some people might, and some people
There
might
you
not
go.
notice over 3%. So it just, there's a lot of
Mm-hmm.
subjectivity that comes into this. And I'm going back again. What is good enough? There was a comment in here about Best Buy that I put on the screen. Where did it go? Where did it go?
Andrew, somewhere. Hey,
It was
Andrew.
here somewhere.
I
There it
saw
is.
that.
So Andrew put it up. Years ago, they offered calibration, had calibrated versus uncalibrated side by side. Most normal people preferred out of the box. And that's a great point. There is a reason why big box stores use torch mode, because that's what people like. A lot of people, they like blue. They like brightness. We're like moths to a flame. If it's bright and it's blue, we're going to like it. So people have, right or wrong, a subjective opinion of what they like. And that's why you mentioned this earlier, FOMO, that a lot of times when things are calibrated, when calibrators are doing something to somebody that doesn't know a lot about video, almost always they're having to put in a mode that gets them back closer to what torch mode gives them, because they'll look at something that is calibrated and be like, well, that's too warm. It's too brown. It's too yellow, not realizing that that's closer to what the calibrated specs should be. Now, I personally like doing a calibration and then deviating away from that calibration to my subjective taste, but my subjective taste isn't calibrated either. So, food for thought.
Yep. And now, last food for thought. So that brings up another point. The Sony TVs from last year that had XR Clear,
Mm-hmm.
even if you calibrated, you could not disable XR Clear. And during the shootout, we noticed that the XR Clear on the Sony A95L consistently raised the brightness of specular highlights above reference. So the G3 measured perfectly, the Sony did not, and the S95C measured perfectly. They both look identical to the reference monitor in terms of the specular highlights. The Sony always a touch brighter, only in those specular highlights. It wasn't raised in the other areas of the scene. So you see the XR Clear specifically appealing to the consumer. They're like, you know what? You guys want HDR? We'll give it to you. But you could disable it. And guess what? They won the King of TVs.
Yep.
So what is that?
Shocker.
And I spoke to a lot of judges, and a few of them were like, I noticed it. I don't care. And a few of them knocked them down for it. So that's why the Sony didn't get perfect scores, because I spoke to them and they're like, oh no, we noticed it, and I was not happy with it. But some guys are like, you know what? I kind of like it, right? Because it's subjective at the end of the day. Now, if you compare it directly to the reference monitor, you will see the difference. There's no doubt about it. But it's not.
But are you talking like 3% again? I mean, are we talking something that some people are going to notice and some people aren't?
So, and this is where everyone says, oh, the A95L has a three-dimensional pop. That's what Sony did. And so how many consumers say to me, hey, which TV has a three-dimensional pop? I want that. And I read that to mean, which TV you cannot disable this extra non-calibrated mode where everything looks a little bit brighter than it should be in the specular highlights, right? Oh yeah, you want the Sony A95L or whatever with XR Clear, because Sony is very clear to me. This is what we're doing. We're making these images look more appealing to the human eye. We're going to sharpen this and do that. And you can't disable it though. That's the beautiful thing. Like, you know what? We're going to own it. We're going to win. We're going to call it a day, and they did. And, it was well worth it because XR Clear was highly praised for that effect. And guess what? LG is doing the same thing this year with their AI director mode, right? Except you could disable it, but it's essentially doing the same thing. If you read the description, it's going to take organic scenes and make it more appealing, right? Skin tones will be richer. When you read it, like, oh, you guys lost last year because you didn't have XR Clear. Now you have something similar, and we'll see enabled how well it does. But the brands see what consumers like. They're just adjusting to the consumer.
So I see a bunch of people saying and commenting about why calibration is important. We're not dismissing that calibration is important. What we're discussing is, should you... Oh, hi, Sloan. Oh, yeah, you got your Crocs.
No, this.
Oh, you fell. Love you.
Uh-oh.
Sorry. So what we're discussing is, does it make sense for the average consumer to judge purchasing a TV based on the calibrated mode, right? Because most people aren't going to calibrate, plain and simple. Most people
That's right.
are not going to calibrate a TV.
We
So
even
if
asked our audience, like on the last podcast, maybe 2 podcasts ago. I said, hey, let me know. This is something we're thinking about. Let me know in the chat if you've calibrated your TV. And I think we had 2.
Yeah.
I said, yeah, I've calibrated my TV.
Yeah.
Everybody else was out of pocket. I haven't calibrated mine.
I mean, I work in the industry and none of my TVs are calibrated. But I think they're close enough. They're good enough. I mean, maybe if I put them next to a reference monitor, I'd be like, oh, but until I do that.
So this brings up such another good point. The way the pro calibration people and the anti, and I don't want to say anti, like calibration, whatever, right? So the loosely, you're ambivalent about calibration. We're not that far apart because it's not like if it's uncalibrated, it looks like crap. So you got to, it is so close that if you calibrate it, it looks slightly more accurate. I'm not saying that if you don't calibrate, it looks way over in left field, and then calibrating gets you creator's intent.
I mean,
you already
displays,
have
maybe.
close. Yeah, right. If you're under $700, that's why I use a $700 example. If you're buying a $1,000 TV or more, it has filmmaker mode. It has its accurate mode. In that mode, you are so close to calibration that once you calibrate, you'll be like, okay, I see a slight difference, but that creator's intent was not lost before the calibration, in my opinion.
Mhm.
It was so
Definitely.
close already. It's like that when you're running a race, you could set a world record or you could set an NCAA record. The NCAA
Right.
record is good enough for most people. You don't need to. It's like the best of the best because it's so close, and that's where we are today. Maybe during the CRT era, I'd have a different opinion because you were totally off, right? But modern premium TVs, and so again, $1,000 TVs, we're not talking Insignias and Fire TVs of the world. Even they're not bad, by the way, but their accurate mode is so close that calibration gets you closer to the creator's intent for the super anal retentive among us who would have either learned to calibrate yourself or pay for a calibrator. But you guys have said maybe that's 0.1% of the population, and it does a disservice to the other 99% for me to focus on the calibration when the reality is, well, I'm not going to calibrate. Does this apply to me? And I don't want to have that question hanging over their heads.
So what I want to ask, Nice, what do you mean by this
Yeah, I was
comment?
just looking at that one.
So Nice says this conversation would be nice to have with calibrators. Lots of misunderstanding concepts and options floating around. Is there something that we said, or is that just stuff that's being said in chat? I'm not
Right.
disagreeing with you. I'm just trying to get clarification to make sure that everybody's
Yeah.
on the same page.
And to be fair, all of my TVs that I review get calibrated, right? I have Sammy Prescott calibrate all my TVs, and I tell people, hey, this is uncalibrated, this is what it looks like. Then we calibrate it, and that's when I do my side by side on the same standard in the same scene. But then when doing something like M-Wave, I sense it's a different experience because I don't want everything to be a shootout. I mean,
Mm.
there's a place for a shootout. There's a
Sure.
place for it because Best Buy and Costco, everything is in torch mode, retail mode. That's also inappropriate. Can't we have some middle ground where people can enjoy what they're seeing out of the box in the way they'll see it at home and then have a reference monitor that is fully calibrated, right? Ryan, what kind of reference monitor do you think we'll be able to get for M-Wave?
I don't know.
If
I'm trying to get Sony's
the new
reference.
one or any?
Well,
Any from
any,
oh, any. Okay.
any. And I'm going to go back to Nice, and he says you and FOMO. Can you elaborate on that? What we're I don't know that we haven't even talked about calibration concepts or anything like that. So do you mind elaborating?
And if
Anyway,
DNS, if you just joined, we're just saying that for M-Wave, the purpose is for consumers who don't plan to calibrate. What do they expect from a TV when they bring it home? Here's a calibrated TV, or here's a calibrated reference monitor, either one. These TVs are not calibrated. This is out of the box. So play with the settings because more than half the time at last year's M-Wave, they wanted to see it in standard mode. So even if I had to calibrate it in filmmaker mode, they're like, can we have it in standard mode? And so we ended up in standard mode more often than not. Now, we do move back, for other people, right? But a lot of people are like, yeah, but at home, so we have to turn on the lights. And then I turned on the lights, and what happened? There was glare on half the TVs. And so I had to put it on standard mode to kind of overcome the glare. And so ultimately, when you go through that process, the calibration is completely lost because this is not critical viewing. There is no judging. There is no winner, but rather, these are the TVs, these are the settings. Which settings do you like? And half the time, let's see in standard mode. I always watch sports in dynamic mode. What does that look like? Oh, the discussion had nothing to do with accuracy, nothing at all.
no. And I want to clarify for people that are, and maybe this is directed at Nice. This is not us saying that you shouldn't get things calibrated. Like calibration provides a level of confidence that what you are seeing is how it should be and it was intended, right? This isn't us saying don't get your display calibrated. This is us saying that the majority of consumers aren't going to care about calibration, right? That's what this is about. So if we're showing things at M-Wave, our assumption or our thoughts are that we should show them in the sense that most people want to see them and are going to use them, because most people, when they get them home, are not going to calibrate them, right? I could, like, I've got my Jetty, I've got my calibration gear here. It's one of those things like when you're a painter, you're probably not painting your own house, right? So I just haven't done that here. I calibrated my projector and I will calibrate the other projectors. But the TVs, I'm not doing critical viewing on those typically. I'm doing that in the theater, and I just haven't done that. So this again, that most people are not going to calibrate their display. They're just not. I mean, I would bet under 1% of people calibrate their TV. So why should they base a buying decision on a calibrated display? If they're not going to, you should get what makes the most sense for you out of the box. Because if it looks like crap before you calibrate it, and you have to calibrate it to get the best, not that it looks like crap, I'm taking this to extreme. Why are you going to buy that? You're going to buy what's best for you out of the box.
Most people do, yeah.
Yep.
And for those who want to calibrate, Sammy, you're asking, depending where you are, but on average, anywhere from $400 to $700, depending on your location. Do you have to fly them in? If you have a lot of calibrators in the area, probably 450. Let's say in a metro area, California, Southern California, 450, 550, 600. And if you have to fly them in, and I'm sure Dwayne could help you quote that, or Classy. Classy flies all over the country calibrating, but it's definitely on average about 500 or more, depending on how many people they're calibrating in your area. Then you can get kind of like a volume deal. Like when I have a calibration done, Sammy comes here and literally is here from 8 a.m. until 8 p.m. calibrating 6 TVs. So I get a volume discount.
I think you're continuing to misunderstand the conversation, and I think it's mainly the calibrators that are misunderstanding this. And I feel like you think that we're attacking you, and we're not. The calibration monitor, as far as I know, Jason Dustel's coming. He's going to professionally calibrate the calibration monitor. We're not just going to get a calibration monitor and be like, hey, compare
Costco.
here. That's not what's going to happen.
100%.
We're going to calibrate.
Yeah, maybe we should have said that first. The reference monitor will be calibrated by
Yes.
Jason Dustel, right? Yeah, it will be calibrated. That's a good point.
So another reason, this brings up another good point, that the reason we're not doing this is because our time is not infinite, right? When we did the calibrations last year, it takes a lot of time for all of these TVs. And then if you have multiple calibrators, like how do you calibrate them all the same way? Because everybody has their own opinions. Then if something goes wrong in the calibration, then you got to do it again. And it's just that we want to make sure that everybody's time is used adequately. And we want to make sure that things are on as level playing field as we can. I mean, Sony did this at the CD demonstrations. They've done it at other demonstrations. They found that what they seem to think is most accurate, and LG actually said this too, that they just want things to be out of the box. And that's directly from the manufacturers.
Samsung said the same thing to me as well. Yeah, I mean, they just want to sell TVs to what people want. If people want, I mean, and to an example, Samsung has improved the filmmaker mode. It's more accurate today than it was when it first started, and they actually improved accuracy on the S95B QD OLED midway through firmware updates because they're, oh, you know what? Yeah, it could be more accurate. If people are demanding accuracy, they will get that better on the filmmaker mode, but it won't be fully calibrated. So, but, oh, let me adjust this real quick. No, the TVs at Best Buy are definitely not calibrated.
They pull them out of the box and hook them up
In torch mode, which
and
makes
put
it
it in
worse.
torch
So-
mode, right?
yeah, so even if it was calibrated, it's in torch mode. So what's the point?
Jonathan, you've been super quiet, man. I want to hear your perspective on.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with what you guys are saying. My own experience with calibration, I had a calibrator come and do my projector. This was with a Epson 5040. And when he was done, I couldn't hardly get it off that mode fast enough. Like it didn't appeal to me. So I went back to my personal preference settings. And I think at the end of the day, I kind of come along where Ryan had said, it's probably a good idea to have it reference calibrated so you know where that is if you're really going to dive into this hobby. And then if you want to deviate off that, like I have what I call a half C settings on my LS 12,000. There's a calibrated setting. And then I had my own subjective preference settings that I established before the calibration. And what I did is basically meet in the middle. So my everyday preference use settings is like kind of halfway between a richer, more saturated, more poppy, more dynamic, brighter image and the calibrated settings. And that's a good place to land because it's maybe not as off-putting to somebody who really enjoys that reference calibration that they're like, this is not right. But it still gives me a little bit more of a flavor to it, a little bit more video enjoyment with a little extra saturation and so forth, color saturation and so forth.
So I'm going back to chat because I keep seeing D-Nice and Classy Tech Calibrations disagreeing with us on certain things. If you guys have disagreements, you're not really elaborating on what you're disagreeing with. You're just kind of giving us general points like, oh, you're wrong, but I'm not going to give you the reasons that you're wrong. So
You said
it's
it was too much to put in
too much
chat.
to type or what. Like, I'm perfectly fine being corrected. We stand here to make sure that we're conveying things correctly. I am not against changing. I am simply conveying what the general populace has said that they want. That's what this is about. So if you guys have constructive criticism, fire away.
Yeah.
Not against it. But just to have things of you're wrong, it doesn't help anybody, right? So if you've got guys have things to say, absolutely say them. But let's not do the just kind of generalizations and firing and just undershots. Not saying you are, but
So
I
this,
think
know what you're
Fomo said as well that you're not putting it in torch mode at M-Wave. You're putting it kind of the more natural mode out of the box that the TV companies would prefer that you use. So it's not the same as going to Best Buy. These TVs are going to be in kind of their best foot forward, their best presentation foot forward that you might get from like RTING's readings. Like this is a good setting to use. That kind of just general best practice type situation.
Right.
so FOMO, can you elaborate on, this is your, well, I guess you did it just last year,
Yeah.
this
So
past
this is only the third year of M-Wave. It feels like we've been doing this for so long.
Yeah. What is the lighting environment in your room?
So,
'Cause the
okay,
good
so
thing
let's
is we have
right.
complete control over that,
We do.
unlike
We do.
Cedia. Cedia, you've got all the lights on. You can't turn the lights off at Cedia. Do you have the opportunity to do that at M-Wave?
So at M-Wave in our room, if we have the same room as we did last year, it's close to complete dark. I mean, you got all the exit signs, whatever, but there's no bright windows from the outside in, right? We can close the doors to a certain degree. You have little light leakages in the doors. So when I shoot the comparisons and live streaming, we'll have the lights off because the glare on the TV is more distracting. If I have the lights on, suddenly you're going to literally see people sitting in the audience reflecting off the TVs. So I'm not turning it off for better color accuracy. It's just to see the TVs and we can talk about them because it's more distracting for the on the live stream to see 4 or 5, 6 TVs side by side, but all you see is a mirror off the TV. So we have the lights off. And then Dwayne D. Nice was asking, well, what mode will they be in? So we will run them through their most accurate mode, right? Filmmaker movie mode. The mode that most consumers assume is the best mode because when a consumer turns on a TV, they look through different modes. Oh, movie mode. I watch movies. I'll put in movie mode. And fortunately, today, TV brands actually, it makes sense. The word movie mode, oh, movies, filmmaker, okay, I know what filmmaker is, puts that on. And so that's what we'll do. But then also, we're going to have sports content. So standard mode, dynamic mode in sports. Most of the content we'll be showing will be streaming content as well. A lot of people today, I know there are some people that buy Blu-ray. We will have a Blu-ray player there just to show them what Blu-ray looks like, but more often than not, they're going to ask for us to put in our Fire Stick, Roku Stick, whatever. They want to see what YouTube looks like, what Netflix looks like, what does Netflix Dolby Vision on that TV looks like, right? And that is actually a bigger difference. Running Netflix Dolby Vision on whatever Sony that's there against an LG, against a Samsung, which doesn't have Dolby Vision, you're going to have 3 different images, and I don't know if calibration is going to make a difference on any of them because we know the Sony, calibrated or not, Dolby Vision, Netflix on the Sony is not going to look anything like the one on the LG, calibrated or not. And even though they're both calibrated, the Sony will look different. And the Samsung doesn't even have Dolby Vision. And my goal is to tell people, look, does it even matter? Because Samsung doesn't have Dolby Vision. You're streaming Netflix. How does it look to you? Oh, it looks great. Okay, then don't worry about it. But a lot of people don't know that. I get so many questions. I can't get a Samsung because it doesn't have Dolby Vision. I'm like, okay, I put out a video that's coming out tomorrow. Do people know that LG just cut out Dolby Vision from 2 more of its models this year? The QNED 85T.
I did not know that.
And the 89T. The 89T is a $7,000 98-inch TV. It has one of their best dimming zone algorithms, the precision dimming. So it's a premium TV, no Dolby Vision. The 85T has full vertical dimming, right? And it starts at 900 for the smallest size up to 2700 for the 85, 86-inch. No Dolby Vision. And they started last year taking away Dolby Vision from their kind of lower QNED models. they're working their way up, and I know why. It's expensive to tune Dolby Vision because Sony's still not getting it right with Dolby Vision. That means they're putting, and Sony reached out to me and says, look, we're working on it. Tell everyone 895L Dolby Vision will be fixed. But guess what? That's money out of your pocket. They're going to pass that cost on to you to get Dolby Vision right. And this is why Hisense Dolby Vision doesn't look great. They don't care. They just slap the Dolby Vision chip in. Whatever happens, happens. If they were to spend the time to make Dolby Vision look as good as HDR10, how much is that going to cost on like the TCL $250 S4? It's a $250 TV. It has Dolby Vision. Do you want it to be a $300 TV to have better Dolby Vision? I'd rather it not have Dolby Vision at all. So it goes back to what I want to show the audience when they get there, on site. Oh, wow, Dolby Vision doesn't make a difference at all, so that it doesn't give them stress, because not many people know which TV model you get, the Dolby Vision experience will be different.
So, clarification again. This is not typically what we do. I would say it's not really an objective comparison. Would you agree with that? This is very subjective. And I think this is where, D-Nice, you're getting a little bit led astray. This is not meant to be an objective comparison. This is meant for people to determine subjectively what they like, right? Because most people don't care about a calibration. They're never going to get one. So if you put a TV that's not doing well and it needs to be calibrated to show what it can really do, if the guy's never going to do a calibration, he's never going to see that anyway. So he needs to be able to choose what TV he likes out of the box and go that direction. Maybe he doesn't want to spend $2,000 or $3,000 or $4,000 on the best TV possible. He's just going to choose what subjectively he likes. This isn't a shootout. This isn't us trying to figure out what the best TV is. This isn't us trying to figure out, who's doing the best at whatever. This is simply allowing people to see, what do you like, and allow them to have knowledge. So when they go make their own buying decision, they can do that. And to have somebody like Fomo there to guide them through that with knowledge, that's what this is. And then somebody said, well, why don't you just have a calibrated, uncalibrated mode? Well, I can tell you that if any of the calibrators would like to volunteer their time to come out for almost a full week to do these calibrations, I will gladly allow you to do that. Jason Dustil did that last year, and I'm not the guy to do that. Like, I can calibrate, but I'm not the guy that's going to say, hey, this is how it should be. So if any of the calibrators want to be able to do that, absolutely. Have at it. Nice asks, what's the point of having a reference mode there? You mean the reference monitor? Well, that's just to show this is how supposedly it should look. This is what you're looking at. Do you like how it should look, or do you like what you're looking at? Again, subjective. There's no objective way, right or wrong way around this. It's about what you as an individual like. We are a culmination of our life experiences, right? No one is going to like the same thing. Most people don't like reference. They like something else. So why not allow them to buy based on something else? That's what we're trying to allow them to do.
And to your point, Ryan, last year, the number one question I had was, so I want to see what an OLED looks compared to a non-OLED. They just wanted to see the difference. And okay, this is a QM8, this is not an OLED. Here's the A95K, here's the G3. And they're like, they look so similar. And that actually ends up being the comparison that I'm going to get most of the time is 98-inch LCD, that's a 83-inch or a 77-inch OLED. And I will explain to them, okay, this is infinite contrast in a dark room. They put in these scenes. They're going to look at OLED versus non-OLED, but they're not even noticing the accuracy differences. It's the infinite contrast against a mini LED. And that's what we're going to get as questions more often than not, because that's exactly what happened last year. Hey, what's this mini LED mean? Brian and I spent half the time explaining OLED, mini LED, LCD, and then they go, oh. And I said, but see this QM8, although it looks similar, look what happens when I turn on the lights. Oh my God, I can't see anything. There's like this horrible glare. I go, and that's why you get the G3, because forget that it's OLED. It has a better anti-glare, right? Or the Sony. And that ends up being the deal breaker, not even the image quality, because the QM8 had terrible anti-glare. It didn't have any at all, right? So when I turned on the light, all you saw was my shirt, and you could barely see that image. And so it's a lot of what we call life experience in terms of quality of life. When I own this TV, am I going to enjoy that TV? And it doesn't even get to the color accuracy. And I just wanted to answer this question real quick. Grouch says, "Hey, Fomo, you should have calibrators on a calibrated TV stream." So I do that once a year. Is I bring in Sammy, and sometimes the Matt, another local calibrator, comes by, and they sit there and spend time calibrating 6 of my TVs, and we talk about it. It's like a 9-hour stream. They go
Wow.
over what they like, what they don't like. We start at 8, 9 a.m. We end at 8, 9 p.m. And by the end, you guys know exactly before,
That's
after we
crazy.
go over the numbers. And then ultimately, based on that, then I start generating reviews because I have the calibrators here. Who did the TVs, all the troubles they had. Like Sammy refuses to ever calibrate another TCL again because it was so hard. And even
Wow.
then, he couldn't get it accurate. Yet Jason's QM8, perfectly accurate, goes, wow, I've never seen such an accurate TCL ever, right? So definitely there was a panel lottery there. But yeah, there is a stream and a venue for everything. That's my venue because I enjoy talking to calibrators. But I know at M-Wave, that is not the audience. They're still trying to understand the difference between an OLED, a mini LED, and an LCD TV without mini LED. But then you get size. I go, okay, well, this is 98-inch, but it's not mini LED, and this is an OLED that's 2 sizes smaller. Here's sits 7 feet away. Which one do you like? Forget the word calibration. That is what they're looking at. Size versus image quality, infinite contrast in a dark room. Let me turn on the lights. Is this bright enough now? And so when we go through all of that, that's already like 30 minutes of comparisons without even caring about color accuracy.
I like this comment. I just put it up. Where'd it go? This one.
See one.
Listen to these buffoons. Sorry for the French. Then the manufacturers should
Steve.
make TV sets as cheap as possible, as the average consumer could care less. That in no way is what we're saying. I think there's a lot of misunderstanding that's going on here and what's happening. Like I personally, I love the Sony XR A95L in the 65 and the 77. It's a phenomenal TV. Stupid bright, infinite blacks, amazing picture. It's amazing. I put it next to the TCL. The TCL looks like crap.
Mhm.
The point here is that not everybody is going to have the budget for that. They're not going to like filmmaker mode. It's not necessarily that we're saying people don't like that mode. It's that most people aren't going to calibrate. So why are we calibrating these displays? That's what this is coming down to. I mean, if you guys disagree with us, have a constructive conversation about it. There's a lot of, I don't know why this is happening. There's a lot of just angst and disagreement, but no objective comments about why you think we're wrong. It's just, hey, you're an idiot. You need to fix this. And not really providing any context into why. So if you got something and disagree, provide reasons why. I can't change or have a constructive conversation with you if you don't provide those or that information. Anyway.
And I think it's also important to understand where we come from. So each of us as YouTubers, creators, or reviewers. So for me, I end up not being really a technical reviewer along the sense of this TV is technically superior because ABC, but rather this TV is good for you because it matches your use case and this is why. And as I do more and more of that, there is less
Usually.
of, I mean, like, oh, this Sony is great for you because it has great processing to help with your cable feed, right? Because Sony does a good job with that. And its skin tones are pretty good out of the box. Or I came from a Sony, I'm used to Sony colors, give me a Sony TV. Very rarely is there one where they say, if I calibrate one of these TVs, which one should I get? Because more often than not, I'm always assuming they don't calibrate their TVs. And so even my editor's choice, the S90C, I wasn't saying, oh, this TV is really accurate out of the box, because all the TVs I review look pretty good in filmmaker mode out of the box. And so ultimately, it ends up being a use case: size, brightness, glare, features, gaming. And rarely is there, well, this calibrates really well, because they all calibrate well. All the TVs that I review now, today, maybe 5 years ago, not, but today, if you choose to calibrate, it's going to calibrate great.
So what
It's
would
the
you
little
say?
things.
What would you say from the filmmaker mode? How close are they already? Like, how much are you getting of a deviation going from like a uncalibrated Sony or LG, the OLEDs, to like you're going from filmmaker uncalibrated to calibrated? How close are they?
They are close. Okay, so I'll just use my Sony A95L as an example before it was calibrated. Definitely, the skin tones on it before calibration was a little bit rich, but
Hmm.
after calibrated, but then I'm a reviewer. It looks so like I'm so used to all these scenes, right?
Hmm.
I watch the same movies and whatever, but it
Mhm.
still looked natural. Just, oh, that's a little bit richer than I'm used to. And then after calibration, okay, that's what I'm used to. But each TV is going to be either it's always a red push in my opinion. Like
Hmm.
the LGs have been that little green push for whatever reason, slightly too green. Even after calibration, it looks a little slightly too green. And on the Sonys, there's that little extra red or magenta, right? But sometimes I forget, wait, reviewers see TVs, so many TVs. We are so used to our material that we're
Hmm.
sensitive to the slight changes. Just like you guys, when you listen to the same track, wait, is it rolling off too early at the 30 hertz? I mean, you guys could tell the difference between 35 hertz roll off, 25 hertz, and 40 because you listen to that track all the time. And for reviewers, it's the same thing. Hey, that specular highlight, it's missing, right? And so I have to take a step back. For that consumer, what is he really looking at? I try to extrapolate the value for him. But if he's already there, and now we're talking about these little things, then we could get into it. But to your point about how far off is it, in the past, lips used to be really magenta, and I have to get it calibrated. A Vizio, a TCL, a Hisense. Now they're getting better. Whereas Samsung, Sony, and LG in filmmaker mode, they're pretty good. I tell people, look, if you are try in filmmaker mode. If it looks unnatural, get it calibrated. If it looks good to you, that's good enough.
Hmm. That's what I think. People are saying, well, there was a comment, something about calibration and stuff, or why get them calibrated at all, or something like that, or the calibration is necessary. But as Fomo was saying, I don't remember what the comment was, but as Fomo was saying, I mean, the TVs have gotten to the point that they're pretty darn good. They're not perfect. Will a professional calibration improve them? Absolutely, for sure.
That's a funny comment. After a couple swigs, everything appears calibrated.
So beer bottle
I love
glasses, my
it.
friend.
That's good.
Oh man, but I've said this multiple times. How far do you want to chase the rabbit?
Sure.
Right?
Yeah,
How much are you willing to spend in the chase of perfection? Right?
And the
yeah.
Some are,
reality is, yeah,
some aren't.
exactly. And that's the thing. We all have to determine what extreme, what level we want to go, and whether that's subwoofers, whether it's calibration, whether it's, you know, taking it to that nth degree. There's some people that will make an upgrade on an automobile to get 3% improvement in performance, to shave off, a fraction of a second on a
Hmm.
quarter mile. Okay, if that's you, that's awesome. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And there's value in that. Not everybody needs that. And what we're trying to do at M-Wave is just honestly really cater to the majority of people. The
Yeah.
majority of customers aren't getting their TVs
Yeah.
calibrated, whether it's a $3,000 TV. They certainly aren't getting a $700 TV calibrated for an additional whatever it costs, 300, 500, 700, $1,000, whatever you charge. So we're just trying to make it as applicable. One of the goals of M-Wave is to provide experiences that just bring value to our customers, to the people that
This
come, the
is a
people that,
this is a really good comment, and we actually mentioned this at the beginning of the stream.
where's
So
that
what's
one?
happening is most consumers can't tell the difference because they don't have a reference at home to compare. We talk about this all the time.
100%.
That not even on this stream, but in multiple aspects of home theater and really life in general.
Yep.
Ignorance is bliss. There is a reason that
Mhm.
saying exists. And in this context, it can save you a lot of money, right?
Mhm.
So one gentleman, the guy that called me a buffoon earlier, and he's right that
I love it.
once you understand and you see calibrated and you put it next to the uncalibrated, you will see the difference. That
Yes,
is
you
not
will.
what we're not saying, that you're not going to see a difference. We're not
Correct.
saying that there's, not a reason to professionally calibrate a TV.
Absolutely.
What we're
Absolutely.
saying is most people, and I tell my customers this with projectors all the time because I try and put my relationships first. What we're saying is that if you're not going to have a reference next to it, like a calibrated reference point next to it, and you're not chasing the rabbit,
Mm.
will you ever know? What you have to establish the baseline. of what is good enough for you. And that bar is different for every person, right? My projector and my theater room, absolutely 100% calibrated every day of the week, no questions, right? But I don't care with the TVs. So it's really important, I think, for everybody to understand, and this comment is really important, that what we're trying to highlight here is that calibration absolutely makes a difference. But for the Joe Schmo, they're not going to have the calibrated reference point, probably don't want to spend extra money because they really just care about a big TV. And I'm not targeting necessarily anybody in chat, but they just care about a big image that looks cool, that can watch football or whatever on. And that's it. What TV has the features, options, and different things that they need to make their life better? And we want to be able to showcase that and talk about it in depth. Now, we will absolutely talk about calibration because I think that's very important. But a lot of people don't care about that. I would like to have, somebody made this comment earlier about, well, why don't you have TVs that are calibrated and TVs that are uncalibrated so that we can, shut this whole debate down? I would love to do that. But unfortunately, like last year, I'm probably fronting a lot of the equipment that's going to be at M-Wave. I think last year I was in over $200,000 in equipment. So unless somebody has a bunch of TVs they're willing to donate for this event, and we are working with manufacturers and stuff, it becomes really difficult to be able to to put them side by side. These are all things that we would love to do, but I don't have infinitely deep pockets to be able to do that. So I have to trim some fat, if you will, sometimes.
So Sammy says out of the box TV is crap. Would you agree or disagree?
It's not crap. Okay, it's not. Okay, it may not be. First of all, what TV?
The definition of crap, though, is subjective. I mean, one person may think. We talked about the 3% that you were talking about earlier, right? 3%. Somebody may see that if it's under 3%, they're like, "Oh, it still looks like crap." And if it's over 3%, they'd be like, "I can't tell the difference." I was actually in a room I was doing an on-site demo for Mad VR. For anyone who doesn't know, I work for Mad VR. Mad VR does a bunch of amazing things with tone mapping, with black bar removal, with AI-based motion interpolation, bunch of other stuff. And I was doing an on-site demo for a dealer, and we were doing things to an end user, right? So I wasn't dealing with dealers. I was talking to an end user. And to everybody in the room that worked in the AV world, the changes that Mad VR was making were blatant, like in your face. To the customer, no idea. Like they couldn't see it. And I was watching the image go like this as it stuttered with motion and interpolation off, and then it was like this with it on. And the guy was like, I can't see it. I don't see the difference. But this is a perfect point to this, that I think a lot of people get in this position of, we're so used to seeing things certain way that it could be, and I'm speaking kind of devil's advocate here, it can be kind of difficult to see things from the average consumer's point of view when they don't really care a lot of times. Could they care if they were educated? Absolutely. But most people aren't going to take the time to educate them, and most of those consumers don't care enough to be educated on that topic.
And well, I want to pull back the title because I don't want it to make it sound like the title is clickbait. The title of this stream is Calibrated TV Reviews, Useful or Misleading? So we know why they're useful. So all the fans know why calibration is useful. I want to repeat why, to me, it could be misleading, which is this. If you take a TV that, if it wasn't calibrated, let's say it would be crap. But once it's calibrated, it looks great. And now I'm just praising this TV. Wow, because I'm comparing it to a calibrated TV. It's calibrated. The other TV is calibrated. The other TV is a Sony A95L $4,000 TV. This is a TCL $900 TV. I calibrate it. Now it looks amazing. I always have to at some point repeat. But remember, I calibrated it. I spent $500 on that. That's going to get lost. They're going to say, that's an amazing TCL. It compared to the Sony. That's the misleading part. I did not intend to mislead them. But I don't know how many times people watch a 20-minute review. Even if I peppered it every 3 minutes, it was calibrated. They don't hear that. They hear, TCL, good as a Sony A95L. I'm going for it. And then, this doesn't look great at all. Fomo, you said. I go, dude, I spent $500 calibrating that TV. And so, wouldn't it have been better to review the TV uncalibrated next to the Sony, and have the Sony uncalibrated as well, and say, look, this is the difference. Like, oh, wow, yeah, that does. The skin tones are totally off, blah, blah, blah. Or I have to do 2 reviews, right? TCL
Yeah.
uncalibrated against the Sony, TCL calibrated against the Sony, and even then people will watch the calibrated and come after me, and I'll say, no, watch the uncalibrated because you don't plan to calibrate your TV. I
Right.
can't win, and that's the
Yeah.
misleading part. People shopping in the G3 A95L, they're also hoping to spend money and not calibrate, right, Ryan? I mean, when you spend up there, you're like, wait, I spent 3,000. I have to spend another 500. Why am I spending
I mean,
3,000? Right?
in all honesty, to a lot of people, the word calibration doesn't even cross their mind. And if you mention it as a custom integrator, they're not going to want to spend another $500 or $1,000 or however much it's going to cost. Some people will, but Joe Schmo, not going to.
Yeah. So D Nice brings up a point. He says, "What's the purpose of using a reference monitor?" It just moved, and or changing the TV out of the box mode if M-Wave is about the quote average customer.
So we keep the TV in its out of the box mode, which is the basics. Here are your settings, movie, standard, whatever. The people visiting, they get to play with the remote. So it's a very, so I guess people need to understand
Kind of
what M-Wave is.
interactive, I guess.
It's
Yeah.
interactive, right? They're there. They're not just sitting in the audience and I'm like, going through a tour. They get to play with the remote and say, hey, what if I do this? I go, yeah, yeah, yeah. It goes, well, you know what? I have a problem with my TV. What's your problem? Okay, this is what I do. Boom, 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 boom. And I show them, oh, this is what we did. Oh, okay, that makes sense. And I told them, look, I can make the LG look just like the Samsung. This is what I do. Boom, boom, boom. Because as reviewers, we know the TV settings so well that we can help them. I have a Samsung at home. How do I make it look more like that Sony? Oh, you need to do this. So really, it's an interactive way to better understand your TV because most people, I found out, they don't want to touch the settings, right? I want the people visiting M-Wave, there is a value. I mean,
Have
they
you
paid a
seen what
ticket,
some people do to
right?
settings, though? And what the image looks like after they mess with settings?
Yeah. How do I get it back, right?
Where'd
And
my
so,
image go? Why is
and
everybody
that's,
green?
and that's another thing. I want to be able to reset the TV if they screwed it up. And what did you do again? If I
Right.
calibrate it, I can't reset it. I can't go in there and go, this is for the consumer who doesn't mind reset. Oh, I screwed up. I don't know what I screwed up. Let's reset it and try it again.
Yeah.
It is for the 80%, right? Let's say 90% is being too aggressive. The 80% definitely don't care, but they do want to make their TV look a little bit better. They attend M-Wave to interact with the TV with me as their guide because I'm there to say, look, whatever TV you buy, I can try to get that TV as close to an OLED as possible. This is what you do. I could get the OLED as bright as possible, but this is what you lose.
So
It's a tour.
the reason, in my opinion, that I want the reference monitor there is because I want people to be able to see how it was intended to look, right? Or as close to that as I can. Now, you're still kind of getting into subjectivism with the calibrator. I think every calibrator has their own subjective tastes on what they think, how close they are, and all that. Is there going to be visual deviation? I don't know. I'm just playing, again, devil's advocate here. But the reason for the mastering monitor is to give people the show of this is how it should look. Which one do you like more? And honestly, I hope that people would say, I want it this way and how it was intended, right? Because that's how I like it. But we want to give people the option, right? So if they like that, we can then say, well, then you could make that over here. You just need a calibration, right? That's the important part here, is to showcase the whole gamut and not just say, you have to do this way or you have to do this way, right? We want to showcase everything so that people are armed with knowledge so that when they go in, they can make their own decisions instead of basing their decision on mine or somebody else's opinion.
Sure.
And
And
it
the
may not
reality
be
is,
opinion, but
yeah, and the reality, Sammy, you say M-Wave will put calibrators out of business. It shouldn't.
no, I hope
By
that's not what we're
any
trying
means.
to do.
Yeah, I mean that's not the purpose of it. If we have a calibrated monitor and you've got a TV out of the box, and if the TV out of the box looks horrendous compared to the calibrated monitor, shouldn't that drive traffic to calibrators?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and to your point, they see the calibrated TV, they go, wow, I really like that D65 white, whatever. And sometimes it's true, you have to spend some time with a calibrated image to get a feel for what the creator intended. Not everything is supposed to be bright white, pushing blue, right? And it allows them to see, okay, this is creator's intent. How far is it off is it? Because what I like about calibration personally, color of the skin tones, right? The natural skin tones. That it's
Mhm.
a combination of white balance and red. I'm very sensitive to skin warmth, as all of us are, right? When you see a face that is even slightly off, it's unwatchable. And I watch a lot of movies where, facial close-ups and all that. For me, the calibration is for the skin tones, not for the blue sky, not for the greener grass, right? And so when we show content with a lot of faces, that's when the monitor pops. It's not when I show, was it Pacific Rim? You're going to hate the
Mhm.
calibrated mode. In Pacific Rim, you're going to want saturated, dynamic mode, whatever. So it's not Pacific Rim that's going to sell people on the calibration. It's going to be
Mhm.
things like Amsterdam, things where it's close up of the face, right? And we'll have those as
Mhm.
well. And so that's how calibrators make their money, is getting the skin tones right, I think.
So Dwayne asks, Ryan, all of this is technically going to be about your opinion if this comparison will be more about subjectivity than objective. I don't provide my opinion. I I try and be very careful about what I say and don't say because I want people to formulate their own decisions, right? I'm not even going to be running that room. FOMO is.
I know.
So
I'm here to take the hits, my friends.
it's I don't know. I try and
Mhm.
provide people guidance by asking them questions so that they can come to their own conclusions about what they want and what they don't want. And I'm also very careful about my vendors, right? So this isn't a shootout. This is a
Mhm.
comparison, and it
Uh-huh.
allows people to formulate their own decisions. I mean, is it any better than what Best Buy does? I don't know. But it's definitely got people that are educated to be able to answer questions while they're viewing things. And Best Buy, as long as we can get one, doesn't have a mastering monitor there to be able to do direct A/B comparisons. So I'm not probably even going to have time to go into that room. Um, I try and not provide my opinions. I just allow people to come to their own conclusions because I think it comes to better end results with happier customers when they're the guide on their own journey instead of me doing it for them. I'll answer questions for them like technical stuff or push them off to somebody if I don't know, but
Mhm.
you got to be the guide of your own journey in order to make it you have the best outcome.
Well, it's in your name. M Wave is experience. I
Yeah.
want it to be an experience. It's not one way. It's not me telling you what something
Not a
is, but
lecture.
rather,
Sure.
right? It's an experience like, hey, what is it you guys watch? Here are different TVs. Here's an OLED. Here's a mini LED. Here's an LCD. Do you see differences? Nope. Then get the LCD.
Now,
It's kind of like that experience.
FOMO, you're going to have them change modes, I would assume, correct? So they can see
Yeah,
all different
yeah.
modes and how the
Because
different
they're going
modes
to want
work.
sports, and every time we put up sports, oh my gosh, this sports, I don't like it in this mode. It's oftentimes they don't even know what mode to be put in to watch sports. I mean, it says sports, but they don't even know that's there, right? So
Mhm.
I don't think, because our audience, our meaning a lot of people watching, both yours and mine, I think are sophisticated enthusiasts in the AV space, whether it's projectors or TVs. They know more than 99%, honestly. I mean, the fact that they go from movie mode to standard, if they know what dynamic tone mapping is, that puts them ahead of the curve, like when to turn it on or off, or even what tone mapping does, or even what HDR is. Just having that knowledge puts them in that 1%. I think M Wave, a lot of people there are just trying to discover, okay, I'm going to spend $1,000. And to them, that's a lot of money. What are the technologies available to me today? And they're going to come in there, and that's the tour I'm giving them. This is not the same level at a shootout like the one in New York City we're doing in Class C, our calibrators. That is highly technical. I mean, we're down in the dirt, right? We're
Yeah.
in the granular level where they're calling the guys at Sony and LG technical and yelling at them, hey, this is wrong, right? Here, we're nowhere close. I'm just trying to teach people the differences. Why is OLED more expensive? This is
Mhm.
why. Turn off the lights, turn on the lights. Why is mini LED? It's the same price, then why should I get a mini LED? This is why. And none of that discussion ever even touches, oh, this is because it's more accurate. They just want to see why they should get one technology, one size. Like we're going to tape everything out so they could, oh, this is 60-degree viewing angle. I'm, 9 feet away from a 100-inch TV, let's say, right? Whatever that viewing angle becomes. So I'm going to tape everything up so that they can experience seating distance, viewing angles, what I think is the fundamentals of TV watching before they even get to the question, oh, by the way, are these TVs calibrated? If they ever ask that question, they're already ahead of the 99% that's going to be there. So that's a different discussion we could always have too.
All right, Jonathan, I'm putting you on the spot because somebody mentioned enthusiasts are going to want objective comparisons. What are your thoughts? I know you kind of talked about this at the beginning, but what are your thoughts on objective versus subjective? And you actually did this with the Epson and the JVC, and that was, I think, there was a decent amount of subjectivity. And there was also, I think, a lot of subjectivity in your own audio calibration.
So I'm going to rewind the conversation and answer to your question a little bit. What FOMO said previously, you get them calibrated in as is the traditional thing at these things, and then you play these clips, these niche clips that nobody ever watches in real world, like the 1917 staircase scene or the basement scene where there's two sets of eyes and you're looking, you're pixel peeping and you're trying to see like, oh, this one has a little leg up. But that's not what we watch. And
at all.
To Ryan's point, what he's bringing up is those projector shootouts, when you watch that kind of content, and this is going to get probably pretty specific again, when you watch that kind of content, the JVC has the best black for, period. No question asked. It does the best on that kind of content.
Oh, it dominates.
But when you put real world content, like you put your streaming stick in there, or you put your sports on, or you watch YouTube, and you have, I've done this so many times in my room. You have the NZ7 and the Epson LS12000 side by side, and you're sitting in the room here and you have them just both playing. It's not nearly as clear which one wins as compared to that torture test content.
Now, just to be clear, if you went up and pixel peeped and found, you can find things. We're not saying that you can't measure or find the differences. It's just that to the naked eye, when you're looking from a viewing position 10, 12, 15 feet back, it is really hard to be able to see these differences.
And so I think that's what FOMO was saying with like the Spears and Munsell content. You can go to that nth degree, but that's not how we use our theaters. It's just really not. And so in those same comparisons, like when you go to those shootouts, and there's going to be people light up on this, so zip up my flame suit here. You go to these shootouts and it's a one-way ticket. Ones that are real objective, that everything is extremely calibrated and extremely detailed. JVC wins it, period. No question. Everybody who doesn't think the JVC wins it is an idiot. That's the turnaround from that. Meanwhile, in my room, I bought the LS12000 and the JVC, and I've done a half dozen shootouts down here with 20 people. And in the normal viewing content stuff, the majority, I'd say 2/3 by the number, 2/3 of the people have liked the Epson LS12000 on real world content. So what do you make of that? It's kind of what FOMO was talking about. Like, maybe people like a little bit more saturated picture. Maybe people like a little bit brighter image. When you don't calibrate them all down and get it at the exact same level, it's more of an out of the box type picture mode. It's almost the same thing. Are we doing a favor by saying the JVC is technically the most accurate when you really dial it in? Or are you doing a favor saying the Epson's the more accurate one, the more people like out of the box? When you're comparing them out of the box, more people like the Epson in my room, period. That is the outcome of this shootout many times.
Yep.
So where does that, what's the more accurate way to represent? Do people go out and get these projectors calibrated, these TVs calibrated, as it were? The answer is no. So the side by side where you're just using daily content and just using them like how people use them might.
Well, they do.
It's
the minority do. To clarify.
Sure. So it's an interesting conversation. For my part, I kind of fall in the more of like, I'm not going to sit there and watch that 1917 staircase scene over and over again. And that's such a rarity in the content that I do watch. It'd be like 1% of 1% of 1% of the content that I run across that we're using as exclusive clips for these shootouts. And it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. It never has. I've said that before on many occasions. So I'm on board with what you guys are saying. Like, it makes sense to me. Use them more like how people use them. Watch the content people use. Watch the modes people use. Let's see how they do.
That's interesting, Aaron.
I want to address Aaron's request because it's very interesting. How about more expensive TV, not calibrated versus more affordable TV being calibrated. What's going to end up happening is the more expensive TV is an OLED, and the less expensive TV is the
Yeah.
LCD. After you calibrate the LCD, it doesn't make a difference, right? You guys know the infinite contrast will destroy so calibration. It is okay. I like calibration. I want my TVs calibrated because I am sensitive to bad skin tone. Okay. But if you look at a TV, an expensive TV that's not calibrated and the skin tone slightly off, but you see that infinite contrast, right? The perfect blacks, the perfect, near perfect contrast. And then the less expensive TV might have the slightly better skin tones, but then it's washed out. You're going to be drawn to the infinite contrast, and then you're going to hire a calibrator to work on the more expensive TV. You cannot watch a washed out TV when there is an infinite contrast there, and that's the M wave. The experience is to see OLED versus non-OLED. The calibration is that last level. Once you've decided you want an OLED, then you can decide whether you should get it calibrated. But you don't decide whether or not to calibrate before you decide whether you get an OLED or a mini LED TV, if that makes sense, right? So I see where Aaron's going, but you're going to end up choosing the more expensive technology before you get to the calibration part.
Wow, interesting.
Anything else to add? That was quite the discussion.
This is a fun conversation.
We
though,
should bring
so-
FOMO more.
So
I've never
just-
seen so much like controversy in the chats as tonight.
I love it. I live on this.
Welcome to my streams, my friend.
And here's the thing, though. I mean, we can enjoy a peaceful conversation like this and have differences of opinions, and that's awesome. The last thing we want is everybody thinking exactly the way that we think. We're just sharing our reasoning behind what we've chosen to do for this year's M-Wave. Does that mean it'll stay that way every year? We don't know. I mean, we're only 3 years into M-Wave, and so nobody's doing this. Like I mean, yes, there are other shootouts out there. Nobody's doing what we're doing at M-Wave. We're literally blazing our own trail, trying
Right
to
or wrong,
provide-
we may be on fire at times, but you
Yeah,
know,
we're
it is what
trying
it
to-
is.
We're trying to provide an event that is super relational, like extremely relational. We're trying to provide an event that allows consumers to see and experience things they literally can't get anywhere else.
Why
Some
do-
people,
Real
you know,
quick, why does this not surprise me with
what's
Scott?
that?
Wait, how
RPGs
loud
broke our
is
OLED.
this?
So now we
Is
use
this-
the LED in the family room.
Is this a 21-inch, dual 21-inch?
No, this is quad 18s with
Oh.
8
Yeah.
10-inch mids
Yeah.
and then a 21-inch wave guide.
right
on-
behind his OLED. I mean, it's like it
These-
shook.
Almost,
the
if you remember from M-Wave 2022, these were the speakers that were in my garage.
The
Oh,
big
those things
tall
are
ones, remember, they're like
massive.
7 feet. Yeah.
Was he trying to hit
Every time we
SPL,
went in.
like 105
I
SPLs
don't
with
know.
his earmuffs
Scott, did
on?
it fall off your mantle or fall off the wall? What happened? I need enlightenment.
Well, you know what he did? He probably bumped up the bass below 60, right? Raised it by another 12 SPLs, and then there you go.
Super fun. All right. You
well,
ready to get
and-
some comments?
Just to Ryan's point, the reason why we do this is because of the name. It's the Midwest AV Experience. There are shootouts. This is why it's not called a shootout, right? I'm not calling this a shootout. I don't think anyone has called this a shootout. It's a demonstration. It's a experience where you get to experience technologies and sizes. And now, if this doesn't do well, like you said, next year we might have it all calibrated. We might have
can
to put in
always go back-
expensive. This is not in stone. It's just last year everything was calibrated, and I want a chance to try and see what would happen. Would it be any different if we saved money and expense and time and resources from calibrating and have one calibrated panel, whether that's an actual reference monitor or just a very good TV that's calibrated, either way, and see how that goes so that people can compare it, because we get feedback from the people attending. So this is for the attendance, right? Unlike a shootout where it's kind of like global, you're broadcasting, everyone's questioning what's happening, right? You have to have your I's and T's crossed. People attending, I'm serving them. So if they show up telling me, well, you know what? I would rather it was calibrated. If I have 5 people say that, hey, you know what? That's enough for me. Ryan, let's start saving up. I'm going to have to try and get a couple of these calibrated next year. But if most people come to me and say, it's okay to have one so that we see what it looks like, blah, blah, blah. it's up to the people that attend. So those of you who want
We're listening
calibrated
now.
TVs, all of them, please show up and tell me, you know what? This is useless to me. Get it calibrated, damn it. And then they spent all that money to fly there to tell me that, you know what? You earned that point right. That's worth 10 votes to me. So we're trying something different because shootouts globally are everywhere. They're
Yeah,
all
sure.
calibrated to
You can find
different
them all over the
degrees
place.
of, right? Why not have it something different? And this is not claiming to be a shootout. It's not and it's not awarding a winner. That's another thing. There is no
There's
judging,
no
right?
trophies.
It's all like Dwayne said, this is subjective, but
Yeah.
subjective to your preference to technologies and sizes. I'm not entering, I'm like, okay, you want natural skin tones? This looks weird, doesn't it? Well, look at that reference TV. That's
Mhm.
calibrated. That's
Yeah.
what it looks like. So this TV could look like that. And I can guarantee you it'll come very close. You need to get it calibrated. If you want to save money, get this TCL. It's this much. Spend another $500. What city are you in? Let's call Classy right now. Hey, when are you going to be in that city? All right. He's got a client. Boom. Now it's going to look very close to this reference TV or monitor. So that is also available too. That's why we'll always have at least one display there that's calibrated.
Mhm.
So out of curiosity, but it's an
Sure.
experience. And Michael, if we need it to be calibrated next year, absolutely.
Yep.
But we got to try something different, you know?
Yeah. The way I've always looked at anything in life is get out of your comfort zone, try something different. You can always go back to what you've always done before if it doesn't work out. And, from day one, 3 years ago when we started in Wave, we didn't want to, the goal wasn't to recreate a trade show. There are plenty of shows out there that are amazing. They're fun. They're great. We want to provide something that is a truly unique experience, something that focuses on building relationships, lasting friendships. We're doing some things this year that will provide even better opportunities for you to connect with other people that are in your area, and and then provide some side by side comparisons. The reality is, when these groups do a shootout, it's not available to the mass public. Like, we're renting out a part of a convention center saying whoever wants to come and hang out with us.
Hey, and if somebody wants to do a room where they calibrate all the TVs,
Cool. Yeah.
awesome.
100%. Be totally up to that. So some of you calibrators,
Do
I
it.
don't know.
You may get 300 new 400 or 500 new guys wanting to book you for a calibration.
Who knows? Yeah. Yeah.
Should we answer some questions?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to do the super chats. I know some of you guys are like, hey, you missed the super chats. We didn't. What I try to do, and some of you guys are from Fomo's channel. So typically on the AV experience, what we like to do is stay on topic for the first whatever portion. If it's 30 minutes, 45 minutes, hour, whatever. Here it's hour 20. And that way it's just congruent. We're not like all over the place. Then once we get done with the topic, then we go back super chats. Then we go through a list of a bunch of things that we've started, and we've got quite a few of those. So we're going to jump right into it. Let me scroll up here. So Bruce, appreciate the $2 super chat. His question was a little bit down here. He says, hey, can you recommend a good 4K Dolby Atmos demo disc that I can purchase from Amazon or eBay, one that isn't expensive and will really show off my speakers and powered subwoofers? Any suggestions? Typically, Bruce, the demo disc that you're talking about, Dolby Atmos, DTS, those types of things, Oro 3D, those are not available for resale. So you can't just go and buy them from a website. Now, granted, some people get them from, let's say, Cedia, or they get them from a dealer or from a brand or something like that, and they have a connection in the AV industry, and then they'll take that and turn around and sell that on eBay. So sometimes you can find that. Just Google Dolby Atmos demo disc or DTS demo disc on like eBay. The downside of that is sometimes those are bootleg copies, and so you're just not guaranteed. So just kind of take that with caution. You may get a burnt DVD. Lance, oh, actually, let me come back to you, Lance. I saw another super chat down here. Christian, appreciate the $10 super chat. He says, I saw Dune Part 2. Let me know in the comments if you saw Dune Part 2. I know a lot of you guys are hyped about that and went to see that this weekend. I think Shane Lee posted a video. I think he even watched it in Dolby Cinema as well as in IMAX, and he did a video on that. So check out his channel. He said, I saw Dune Part 2 in the Dolby Cinema. It was life changing. Bass shook the room, my chair and me. The sound was excellent, but I couldn't hear any Atmos effects. I want to build something like that at home. So, did any of you see?
You know,
Dune?
I didn't.
Hey,
I
you
did.
know,
I was
Michael,
on
can
the
I
slopes, baby.
can I address the Dolby Cinema where it shook the room? Christian, how much of that shaking was your chair? Because I'm
Mm,
pretty certain that the
yeah.
subwoofer in a Dolby Cinema is not qualified to go below even 35, right, Ryan? I
Mhm.
mean, the amount of energy and power and the number of subwoofers to pressurize Adobe Cinema is more expensive and more power consuming than that theater could handle. So that's why they installed the shaky seats. Because I spoke to a couple of Adobe guys, like, yeah, no, the shaky seats is to give you that. So I agree with you. You got to
Tactile.
get the shaky seats, right? You got to get the shaky seats at home.
That's
That's
the
how you
new
make your room.
technical term. We're no longer calling them tactile transducers.
Shaky seats,
They're
baby.
shaky seats.
Shaky seats.
Did you
Michael,
get none of the rest of you guys saw Dune 2 yet?
I didn't.
I will.
Did you see it?
And at Dolby Cinema,
I
not yet,
did.
though.
I
I
will
saw it
wait
this week.
Let's stay there for a
until it
second.
comes out on K-Skate.
So,
I
what are your
went and saw
thoughts
it
on
with
it?
Luke. I liked the first one. I'm not as much of a fan as some of these guys are. I mean, there's some diehard fans on this. I thought the first one was like a B plus range. That was for me. And I
Okay.
thought this one was a B minus. I thought it
Okay.
was a small step down, but I still really enjoyed it. The
Still a good
sound was
movie.
phenomenal, just like the first one. The story got a little bit.
Wonky.
It was a little long. It was a little bit too long for me. And some of the fight scenes and stuff, they're constantly talking about how this group of warriors is amazing and unbeatable and stuff. And all the fights were very one-sided, very lopsided. Like you never really saw any like intense combat that went back and forth. It was always just one-way sweeps.
Right.
I had some complaints. I'm not probably going to go into that because it sounds like I'm against the grain here, but maybe a little bit more critical with it than some people. Still good movie, B minus for me. It's definitely worth watching just for the sound and audio alone.
Yeah,
I
no
mean, it's just
spoiler.
amazing.
Yeah.
For that.
Shaky whoopee. That's that FOMO. Shaky whoopee. I love it, dude. Yeah, Haterade said he watched it. Super cool. A lot of guys. I heard a lot of guys watch it. And they said they really enjoyed the movie. So I'm curious to see it myself. Michael, appreciate the $2 super chat. Are TVs calibrated at Best Buy? What do you think? Probably not. They're just on. They have a. We call it torture mode, or not torture. Yeah. What do you call it?
Torch
Torch mode.
Vivid
So
mode.
there's a setting. A lot of times when you first buy your TV, they kind of ask you like, "Hey, is this in a commercial setting, like a Best Buy, or is this in a home use?" Because
Well, that's
those are two
relatively
and
new, but yeah,
what's that?
that's a relatively new setting, but yeah.
Yeah, so those are two entirely different like color modes. They realize that if they're in the fluorescent lighting, that's going to be totally different environment. So they've got to kind of tweak that TV just to make it look good under those lighting conditions. And so more than likely they're not calibrating anything because sometimes they'll sell a floor model, grab another TV when it comes in, put it right back on the shelf because they've got to have those displays up. They're not calibrating those, I wouldn't think. Getty appreciated the $2 super chat. Is there ever a risk of calibrating a TV? Can that damage? Does it shorten the lifespan? Any negatives to doing a calibration on a TV that you can think of?
I mean,
Nope.
I would
Not that I
actually,
could think of.
I would
One thing
actually
I
think
find
it
that-
would help.
So one thing I find that's interesting about calibrating a TV, typically when you and correct me if I'm wrong, because I don't have calibration software myself, but if you calibrate a projector, isn't it really difficult to go back other than just a factory default to go back to uncalibrated? Is it easier to do that with a TV?
So you're probably talking about like how JVC, when you do the calibration with the automated version, that it overwrites the original calibration. You can't go back to it. Is that what
Right.
you're referring to?
Yeah.
That's not the case with all of them. That's
Okay.
like a JVC property. I don't
got
think
you.
Sony and Epson do
Okay.
that.
I see. Okay. Like I said, I'm something curious. I was curious about myself.
So D Nice says before you move on that the home retail mode has been around since the early 2000s. What I specifically meant is that it asks you, a lot of the new TVs ask you when you're going through the startup mode, like it's a question that it asks you, is this in do you want this to be set to retail or whatever? And that's mainly, as far as I understand it, because I don't work in retail anymore. The TV will automatically reset settings. TVs
So
did used to do that.
Stefan, appreciate the $2 super chat. He says, if space is limited, can I put my surrounds, which are typically placed behind us, can we put those in front of us? My recommendation would be no. It's going to get really wonky. I would rather have no surrounds. I guess it doesn't add any benefit to you to have your rear surrounds in front of you. The purpose of them is to give you an immersive experience.
But specifically, he didn't say rear surrounds. He just
What else would there be? Like
Sound
Atmos
bars.
surround?
Wait, don't sound bars have surround in front?
They do, and that's why I question that. I don't think that's ideal. Yeah. So to me, one thing I've always tried to share with my audience is a properly set, let's just say a properly set up 5.1 system. So you got 5 bed layer speakers, 1 subwoofer is better than an improperly set up like 7.1 or 9.1. Ideally, you want to put them where they're supposed to be. And most of that's determined by angles, not by a certain distance. So anytime that you deviate from that, you're just going to get some really odd results, I think. So, all right. I'm going to let you guys read some of this just to give my voice a rest.
Lance Alex says, yes, definitely reviewing post-calibrated TVs is very secondary to what the majority, even if the hardcore guys. Soft user configuration certainly needs to be included, though. So I think he's talking about like the settings and things like that with configuring the out-of-the-box TV. And Fomo, I think you're going to do that.
Yeah.
Allow people to change things and then reset it back to factory.
Yep. And then show them how to get it close to the calibrated reference monitor, close. But then we get to a certain point where, okay, this is as close as it gets. If you need it to get closer on this TV, you're going to have to get it calibrated. And it's also panel variance, right? Some TVs come out of the box a touch more accurate than others, and they'll get to experience all of that. And hopefully this time we don't have a TV that fails. Like last year, was it the Samsung S90C just died on us? So yeah, it happens.
It was embarrassed.
Yeah, it's like, oh no.
Not really. I think that TV actually does really well with calibration.
Yeah,
It
I think we
does.
talked about this earlier.
Spot
Grave.
on.
What consumer calibrates their TVs. We did a poll, and this is not a a huge.
This isn't an objective poll at all.
Yeah, I mean, I just asked in the chat, and there were like 2 that chose to do their TVs. Ryan has some that he's calibrated. I think Fomo calibrates all his TVs.
No, none of mine are calibrated.
Oh, I'm sorry. So it really just depends on the consumer. If they want to get that nth degree, if they want their TV to look the very best that they can, then they're going to be the ones that choose that. Of course, with anything, it's in life, there's a price for performance typically, and some people aren't going to be willing to spend that price to get the additional performance. Some people say, man, absolutely worth it. So I think that's really just going to be determined by the consumer. So Patrick, appreciate the $5 super chat. He says the closest Dolby Cinema to me has gray blacks because of too much ambient light. Man, that's unfortunate. Do the Dolby Cinemas that you go to have the same problem?
Kind of. The exit lights, Ryan, I saw you shaking your head no, but those exit lights are brutal.
They are.
Yeah, right.
They've always light up one corner of it.
Didn't used to be a problem, but they are now. Damn safety.
And then they also went to blue in the Dolby Cinema, and blue shows up on the screen a little bit more. That's why I like the red lights, because the old AMC Prime, before they rebranded Dolby Cinema, used red, and it didn't show up on the screen nearly as bad.
Interesting.
That's why I refuse to see movies in the theaters now.
Aubrey says trying to buy an 85-inch stuck between the U8K X90L and the QN90C. Any advice would be appreciated.
All right, my kind of question. So the Sony X90L, if you're experienced with Sony, it has the traditional Sony colors. Even though it doesn't have a mini LED, it actually is almost as bright as the U8K. I would choose the X90L over the U8K because out of the box it's going to be closer to accurate than U8K. The QN90C, on the other hand, is a better gaming TV than either of them because in game mode, it preserves its color saturation a little bit better. And it's just, lower latency. X90L is not designed for gaming the same way the QN90C is. So if you have Xbox Series X, PlayStation 5, the QN90C will look a little bit better. All three are great. The U8K will have the most kind of HDR impact to a certain degree, but if I was to rank them in order of premium and all the features, I'd go Samsung, Q90C, then X90L, then U8K. So get the one that's the cheapest if you're on a budget, because all three are excellent, by the way. But for visual quality, I think the Q90C is a step above the other two, and then comes the X90L. The U8K will give you the best HDR impact, but you're going to have, are you sensitive to motion? Its motion is not as good as the Sony or the Samsung, and
Now,
its
when you
image
say
processing.
impact, is that in any way
Its
accurate?
impact means that its specular highlights is actually going to be a little bit brighter than the Sony or the Samsung. If you compare it, same scene, it shows let's say it's supposed to be 2000 nits, right? Because they're all kind of mini LED type TVs except for the Sony. It'll have the brightest, it'll come closest to that 2000 nit specular highlight than the other two, but its color accuracy will fall shorter than the other two. Is that the trade-off you want? And most people don't care. They're going to be, phenomenal. But then do you want Google TV? So U8K has Google TV. Sony has to me, slightly better version of Google TV because they have more settings for you to play with. And I prefer the Samsung Tizen personally because I like the way they set everything up. It's cleaner, it's easier to navigate. So that's another thing is the quality of life between the TVs. But yeah, use case as well. If you're watching a lot of cable, low bit rate content, the Sony should clean it up better. The XR Clear is on the X90C. Q90C also has a better image processor than the Hisense. If you have high quality bandwidth, you're always on a good gigabit connection, the U8K should be fine for streaming.
So, is there another TV that you would pick over those in
I
that
would
price range?
I would pick the QM8 over the U8K if you want that matte, because the QM8 has better contrast, deeper blacks, slightly better blooming control. So I'd go with the QM8 and the X90L and the Q90C. The U8K has slightly better color accuracy though. So the QM8 is even worse. And that's the thing is, this is the subjective part. How sensitive is Aubrey to skin tones? The Sony and the Samsung are the safe way to go because Samsung in filmmaker mode is actually pretty good. So the skin tones looks very natural. Sony in its custom mode also looks good. TCL and Hisense, luck of the draw. You might get a good panel out of the box. I'm assuming she's not going to calibrate it. Sony is the safe way to go. It's normally my recommendation for most consumers. They'll be happy. And what TV is she coming from? If she's coming from a 5-year-old TV, 6-year-old Vizio, get the Sony. It'll look amazing compared to what she has before. If she's coming from a Samsung, then get the Samsung because the Sony may not have that exaggerated saturation mode that Samsung could have in its dynamic or standard mode. So what TV she's coming from is also important because if let's say the U8K is the cheapest TV here and she wants to save money, she should get the U8K because it's still better than her 6-year-old LCD TV. So it's relative to where you're coming from. And she might get a larger, 85-inch. That's probably as large as she wants. And also keep in mind the 85-inch size, you're going to have dirty screen effect, more commonplace on the Hisense than the other two, just because Hisense and TCL are the larger sizes. That tends to happen, but she may not notice it. So, it's one of the when you save money, they're cutting costs somewhere. But consistently, most of my viewers love the QN90C at the 85-inch size. So statistically, you will like the QN90C. I mean, that's just a very good TV.
Next. Good answer.
Yeah. And it doesn't have Dolby Vision? Doesn't matter. Because I know that's always, wait, it doesn't have Dolby Vision. Don't worry about it.
So Stefan, appreciate the $2 super chat. He says removing surrounds, delete the sounds, delete it. I guess like basically I'm trying to say how to rephrase what he's saying. Removing the surrounds, delete sounds, or convert to front. So he's asking, so if you do not have the surround, yes, they're going to be remapped to whatever speakers you've got. So it's going to push them to your front speakers anyway. It's not ideal, but I don't think you're going to be missing that. Am I correct in that, guys? So if you only have, let's say, instead of a 5.1 setup, so his question earlier was if he had his rear surrounds up front, so now you got 5 speakers up front as a front sound stage, LCR plus 2 surrounds. Would that be basically the same as only having 3 speakers up front, telling your AVR you only have 3 speakers, and then internally it's going to route whatever channel or whatever sound was supposed to be back there routed to your fronts. I don't know.
With objects, it wouldn't route to the fronts, but with the press tracks, I think it folds it all into the channels you have. So your traditional
depends on
Dolby
what-
Digital, it'll fold it all down. But if you're using Dolby Atmos and there's an object that's supposed to be going on in the back, it
Sure.
won't play. It
It
doesn't
won't
fold
do
that down.
Okay.
Yeah, that's my understanding.
Okay. Yeah, I haven't had a 3.1 system in a long, long time, so I'm not real sure what that would do, and I've never tested it. SRW 1000 day 1 uncalibrated, day 2 calibrated. Going back to the TVs at M-Wave.
To each their own.
Again, it's still
Who's doing the calibration? Great suggestion.
How late are they staying up?
now. And to all fairness, let's say we have 15 TVs there.
Mm-hmm.
So M-Wave ends at, let's say, 6 o'clock at night. Show shuts down. Starts the next day at 9 a.m. When do those TVs get calibrated? You know, so that would be a huge challenge there. It would be cool ideally, but you'd almost have to have 2 sets of TVs, one calibrated, one uncalibrated. I think it'd be just a pretty logistical nightmare there. Christian,
I
last
thought he
year,
was talking about his own TV, like he bought it and then the next day he calibrated it.
no, I think he was saying at M-Wave, because that was during that whole discussion. So these are old questions from earlier on the show. Christian, last year the QN90A looked significantly better when Brian took it out of its calibration mode.
Oh, yeah. Let me give it context. So that was the 98-inch. Ryan, remember that giant TV?
Yeah.
So the QN90 was a 98-inch, and it did look a little. It looked like it was too dim.
Okay.
Whatever the mode it was in, which was, I think, Filmmaker. And Brian's like, look, if it looks too dim, you got to put it in standard, pop up the contrast enhancer. So he took it out of that dim look. And that was calibrated by Jason. And so 2 reasons for that is, one, it's an older technology. And it just was that first generation. It didn't have the contrast and the impact of the QM8 or the OLEDs, obviously. So to keep up, we had to take it and put it into standard mode and then add in that contrast enhancer. And suddenly it was a completely different TV. And most people are like, oh, you know what? I would want to put it in this mode, because that last mode, although accurate, that was calibrated, it did not have the pop, that 3-dimensional pop we talk about. But it was definitely, the colors were oversaturated. You know how contrasty, the blacks were too black, right? A little midtones disappeared, but it looked more like that OLED experience that people saw on the OLED, and they wanted that. And that's kind of like that extreme. That's why contrast enhancer is there. It's to get you to that, especially the lights on. It was even worse. That it was even more washed out. So that helped a lot. So that's what I think Christian was referring to, is when we put it in that standard / dynamic mode, you have that extra turbo. And that's what they wanted to see.
Cool. Rides Home Theater, good to see you, brother. Appreciate the $5 super chat. FOMO, in your opinion, what 75 to 85 inch TV controls motion blur the best? Most of my content that I consume is TV, like sports. Honestly,
That would be definitely either the Samsung or the LG. The Sony sports motion, they're designed for movie motion. Their controls for sports motion, the number one complaint is, oh, I see some artifacts, blah, blah, blah. That's not going to happen in the Samsung or the LG. I think it's almost as if they definitely optimized their sports mode and motion, optimized for sports better than Sony. So you're pretty safe with either Samsung or LG. You hype up the anti-jitter max, right? Max interpolation. You're going to have great motion resolution, is how I would describe it.
Okay.
And probably Samsung this year has upped their game a little bit more. They're very focused on sports motion this year.
Cool. Appreciate the question, Don, and the super chat. Going back here, Chris says, good evening, gentlemen. Is there a certain TV brand that comes better calibrated out of the box? I feel my LG C2 needs some calibration. Does he have FOMO? Does he just...
Like filmmaker mode on all the TVs come closest, but they all have their out of the box color issues that need to be fixed. On the LG, it's a slight green push. So if you see gray scenes, there's always that. I don't know. I mean, they know about it. I don't know why it's still there. It's like a slight green. On the Sony QD OLEDs, there's a slight magenta and red that you're going to have to take down. Those are the two things that I see as most commonly addressed on your C2 probably does need calibration. Look at, if you have spirits and muscle, look at the faces of the female models. If they look a little bit green or pale to you, especially I guess there's a Latina there and maybe an Asian. The Asian one is really good because if she's even slightly pale, you could tell when there's too much green. And the C2 is no exception. So you probably do. If you watch a lot of skin tones, that's where I notice it.
I would say that every TV benefits from calibration. I mean, no TV is perfectly calibrated out of the box. I mean, I can't say no. Maybe there is one just by happenstance, but I think virtually any situation you're going to benefit because the calibration is mainly benefiting, in my opinion, the viewing environment, right? Because the viewing environment is going to impact how things are represented or how you're perceiving them on the display. So yeah, you could absolutely benefit from calibration. Now, what brand would you say out of the box is closest?
Sony is the most pleasant out of the box because it's always they err on the side of warmth, and for whatever reason, LG is erring on the side of green. And maybe it's changing this year. I don't know. It's just the last few years I've noticed that. So, and TCL is erring on the side of magenta. Weird. And Hisense is very similar to Sony. It's erring on the side of warmth. So, out of the box, if you don't notice the TV is too warm, then you're okay. And when you get a Sony, that's what I've noticed is, warmth is appealing. It's not, you're not going to notice it. And you always have that on the Samsung, warm 1, warm 2, right? You can play with that. But it feels to me that Sony consistently, and we're talking, I'm not saying accuracy, it has the most appeal out of the box. That's why people stick with Sony.
So D-Nice says, if you're at a white point target of D65, LG comes closest.
That's a good point. And D Nice, by the way, he calibrates
He's a professional
hundreds.
calibrator.
I mean, he sees more C2s and G2s, C3s and G3s than probably anyone. I mean, he's calibrated so many. So he has a pulse on statistically what you're going to see from these TVs. So that makes sense.
Cool.
Now, Dwayne, is that consistent through all of the LG OLEDs, or is that only for a specific model? And what mode is that in? I'd be interested to know. I'm assuming it's filmmaker, but
Probably.
I don't know.
So I'm not real sure what this is. Boss says, in my opinion, misleading. 99% of
It's
TVs.
regarding the
bought.
title.
The title.
The title.
Oh, I see. Okay. Gotcha. JD says they should review based on most accurate out of the box, made and fully calibrated. They should be equally weighed in terms of final recommendation. I think we've kind of addressed a lot of that during that first hour and a half.
Yep.
So if you're watching the replay, or I mean, if you've kind of joined us late, go back and watch the beginning.
It's worth it.
It was a fun conversation for sure. Robert, showing a calibrated TV and uncalibrated on shows the consumer the reason for it being, yeah. So I think we hit that as well, right?
And just to go back to what Dwayne said, he says all LGs in filmmaker and ISF modes. Is that, I'm going to ask another question. Is that just LG OLEDs, or does that include LED
QNEDs.
LCD as well, and QNEDs and all that stuff? Oh, he clarified all LG OLEDs.
That makes sense.
Okay.
That's their Halo product. They take
Yeah.
that seriously.
Yeah, I think a lot of our starred comments from earlier were, I think we kind of
addressed.
addressed a lot of them. So, but I haven't read through them, so I'm just going to put them up there. And if we've addressed it, we'll just move on. The calibration should be irrelevant in ratings. The information should be given, but it should not have any effect on the recommendations, regardless of price tag segment. What are your thoughts on that?
I don't agree with that.
Yeah, that's the other extreme. As a formal TV review, I don't agree with that either because it's hard to render an apples to apples opinion at that point. So M-Wave, so we have to separate this. So it's like, wait, is FOMO switching? We're talking about as a buyer consumer, right, guiding them at M-Wave. But when I'm doing a comparison for reviews, all of my TVs are calibrated because I need them to match a specific standard. Once they're matched, now I compare their ceiling. capabilities, which is what a lot of people want to know, is what's the ceiling capability of these TVs? And then when they ask me specifically, well, this is my use case, should I get? Then I will fall back on a response that doesn't require it to be calibrated. So it's so, and you guys know this, right? It's so use case specific that it's hard to give a one size fit all review. You can do what you can with the review for review purposes, but like what he's saying, calibration should be irrelevant in ratings. I don't rate my TVs. I can't because everything is a use case. So maybe he's talking about the ratings, rtings.com, which they do score, right?
Right.
And and they score it, they have their uncalibrated mode, their calibrated scores. So but I disagree generally speaking. As a principal, as a reviewer, I need to have it calibrated too.
Okay.
I think it should be two separate
Yeah.
things, right? You should have a recommendation for uncalibrated and a recommendation for calibrated, because lumping them both together or just making one irrelevant leaves too much out of that equation. There's too many variables left unaccounted for.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeti, appreciate the follow super chat. Cheap extra large TVs intrusion into the projector market. What's the future of projectors and short throw? Are they here to stay, or their future's uncertain? And so I actually have a dedicated video on this. We talked about it on our podcast because I think it is a very relevant conversation. And it's funny because I've got a screenshot. There's about 7 other content creators. They've got a video as well. So there's plenty of us with our opinions on this. My personal opinions, extra large TVs are not going to be replacing dedicated home theater projectors anytime soon. There's a lot of challenges with that. Where do you place the center channel, the heat, the cost, all of that stuff. Where I do think that they could really impact is the ultra short throw projectors, because the purpose of the ultra short throw projectors initially was they were being marketed as large TVs. Well, now we have large TVs, 98 inch, 100 inch, 115s coming around the corner. And they're going to become more affordable. So once those happen, I'm not so certain that ultra short throw projectors are really needed. So that's my own personal take. But like I said, I've seen a bunch of content creators. They provided their own thoughts on that. But I think it's a great discussion for sure, Getty, because that's where we're at. We've got these large format TVs, which is amazing. It's great. I just don't see that it's going to be, replacing. Now, Jonathan, we had a good discussion on that. Jonathan's like, I don't know, Michael, if they came out with a blank size.
I think 120 OLED, man, I'm out. I'm leaving the projector world. I'll figure out the center channel.
I think I've got to agree with Jonathan, because the majority of projector installs that I do, they're around that 110 to 120 inch range, and most people do not put speakers behind the projector, even if it's a standard throw.
And again, that's not for everybody, but I just don't see that.
But I think you're looking at it from the enthusiast market, the people that are doing the bigger stuff, and that's the minority, I think.
Yeah, 100%.
So I think it's coming.
The majority of my audience doesn't even have a dedicated home theater.
Yeah, I think it's.
Two-thirds of them don't.
I think it's coming now. For people that are audio purists, I don't know that it ever will, but I don't know. I don't know.
I think it's going to displace the $5,000 ultra short throws. I mean, let's not talk about the premium JVCs above 10,000. I think that's a different world. But when you have a 100 inch, that's $2,000. It's displacing an entire segment of the $5,000 ultra short throw crowd, right? The Hisense, that was 5,000 with a screen.
Right.
And I think 100 and 110 inch are so close to 115 and 120. A lot of people in the $2,000 range will be like, I don't have to deal with a screen or whatever. So below 5,000, anything that was selling is going to be gone in the next few years, because already brand new launch U76 Hisense, $2,000. I couldn't believe, and it sold out at Best Buy. You guys saw that within 2 weeks. It's gone.
Phenomenally fast.
Those were potential ultra short throw buyers, right? They lost all those guys.
You got to think the ultra short throw thing is strange, because they seem to be ramping that up, but I can't see it lasting either. Like it seems like it's
Yeah.
going to be a flash in the pan.
Yeah.
And it's very strange that they're focusing their efforts on it right now, at least as an industry. It seems like we're getting more models, more advancements, more like it seems to be like the end thing at ABS Forum, and it really doesn't make a whole lot of sense with these big TVs right at the
Well, at
doorstep.
ISC, I mean, there were big TVs everywhere,
Mhm.
even in 21:9 aspect ratios. It was,
Oh, really? That's
yeah.
interesting.
TCL
And
had
what-
some.
What's kind of interesting too is I've heard some interviews with, let's say, a certain brand, and they manufacture both. They manufacture a large TV, but they also manufacture ultra short throw projectors.
That is true.
And their comment was, we think that there's enough use case scenario for each. So at least from what they're saying outwardly, they think there is room for both. I'm just not certain of that.
Yeah, I don't think so either. Maybe in America it's different. The U.S. is different than other countries too. Maybe in Asia, they just want to throw it on a wall. They don't want a giant TV. It's easier to carry an ultra short. Personally, I hate the ultra short throw for you got to balance it perfectly. I mean, auto keystone, but you don't have auto balance. I mean, you don't have it perfect. Kid walks by, dog walks by, knocks into the ultra short
You
throw.
bump it.
It's another hour out of your life.
But
I
FOMO, they
hate
do
that.
have these little kind of pucks that go around the feet to keep it from moving. So you do have
But
that.
yeah,
They're trying.
the fact that it takes an hour just to get it up and running, right?
It's a pain.
It
That's the
kills me. Like
biggest challenge. I've
I
reviewed
have
a bunch of
the
them.
Hisense PX2 Pro here. It took me almost definitely an hour to get everything set right, and
And
I have
every
it on
single
top of
time you have to
yeah,
skew it too.
every single
Like
time, and that
it doesn't make, so like I'm warping the image intentionally, and it kind of breaks my heart. I'm like, I don't want to warp it. I don't want to bend the corners to make it fit in the screen. So it's
right.
it's
And not
definitely
to
a pretty
mention,
loose.
and the screen itself, right? It's easier
Mhm.
just to throw it on a wall. If your screen, you're like, wait, is my screen off? What? And then you have to roll it up, roll it back down, like, oh,
Right. It's a
and you
challenge for sure.
forget all of that, right? All of that you don't have to worry about. And I think once a person's gone through the nightmare of their first ultra short throw, and they see that's it, I'm done.
It's got 115
One
inch
thing,
TV
one
for
time purchase, huh?
$1,000.
That's it.
Yeah, it's a challenge. JR question says, should a well-calibrated TV look good in any room environment, or is the calibration specific for each room environment? Because we know some rooms have more light control. Some rooms are like my living room has 3 massive, like a sliding glass door. There's other windows that kind of impede into the room. So is the calibration based on the lighting condition? And even a question from me tagging in with this, are you able to calibrate for, let's say, lights on and lights off? I'm guessing not, but so what's the thought on there?
The calibrators I've spoken to, it has to be specific for if the TV is in a room where the lights are on and you have pink walls, that affects how you see the light coming out of your TV because your eyes are adjusting for your wall. Is your wall white? Is your wall that 15% gray color that you bought specifically to keep it from shifting in your own eyes? So that's why they say your TV is assumed that you're in a completely black room, dark room, and then you have that special ambient lighting that doesn't affect the color. But that is the ideal situation. But if your room is lit, the calibrator has to make they have to offset the
Sure.
room. So
Yeah.
if you have a hot pink room, the calibrator is going to have to take that into consideration.
Okay. And I guess at that point, he just has to say, hey, what is the typical viewing environment like when you're watching movies or watching TV? Is it with the lights all
Yeah.
on?
Yep.
Which probably a lot of people it is.
And what kind of light? Is it warm lights, tungsten? You have people with these old what is it, old timey tungsten super yellow red lights that's lighting up the room. That affects how they calibrate your TV as well.
Yep, I agree. Let's see, Dennis. I wasn't aware of TVs being calibrated prior to reviews. I feel a bit naive now. So I learned
So
something.
that's our 80% right there, right?
Yeah. Boss says if the reviews are for consumers, then they should be reviewed how most are going to use the TV. So that's fair. So his opinion is out of the box would be better. Getty says, is calibrating a TV? Okay, we talked about that one. Does it, reduce the lifespan? Miles said I put 100 hours on my C1 before I calibrated. It was night and day difference to him. So some of these aren't questions, but they're just thoughts. Christopher, if I'm spending over $3,000 on a TV, it's worth the calibration and wall mount. See? So he finds the value in that. And I think that's gonna vary from person to person. Some people are gonna spend $4,000 on TV, but they still don't want to calibrate. Some may spend $2,000 and want to calibrate. Just depends on the individual.
I'm trying to see how the wall mount works in that one.
Get
Get a free wall mount with every calibration.
Well, think about this. If you're super cheap and you don't want to mess with it, you just put the little feet on. But then, like, okay, if I'm going to spend $3,000, I want this thing to float on the wall. I'm going to cut a hole in the wall, drop the power cord and the HDMI. Like, I'm going to spend some money. But if I'm just throwing, if I got $700, man, we're going TV stand, feet. We're dropping the cord right behind there and call it a day, I think is what he was saying. Chad says reviews using calibrated TVs in filmmaker mode really don't offer much. I personally want to know about what all the TV can do in its various modes and options. And again, that is, that's what's important to chat. Doesn't necessarily mean that that's a representation of every consumer out there, for sure. But if that's important to you, then, and that's the hard thing. Some people, anytime that we do a comparison, even if I compare, like on my channel, I do a lot of audio, I don't do a lot of video. So I may be comparing two subwoofers. Well, there's a bunch of different ways that you can compare them. There's a bunch of ways that you can measure them. Do you do near field? Do you do at the main listening position? There's so many different ways. And the reality is content creators and reviewers, we physically can't do every single scenario out there. We just have to do the best that we can. And so I'm sure, Fomo, he's got his style and his way of reviewing TVs and comparing them. But then you may have another person that does TV reviews, Brian or whoever, and they may do it slightly different. And that's a good thing to me, because now you're getting kind of a broader spectrum of, the different ways that you can look at those comparisons. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah, and you want to follow reviewers who watch the kind of movies you watch, right? Because if all their content is I Love Lucy and Columbo, and you're like, wait, well, I watch Pacific Rim, and you list all these action, bright Disney Plus, and he never mentions any of
Jonathan's favorite movies.
the Waltons. So, it reflects the reviewers' preferences and tastes, and they're getting TVs based on those things they watch. So if you watch enough of a reviewer's reviews and the content they use, you get an idea of which reviewers reflect your taste as well. And that's why I like live streams. That's when you show up to say, hey, you didn't mention this, but I watch it this is my room. What are your thoughts now? And it might be a completely different answer that was never mentioned in the review. And that's why I think live streams are so important. It gives a chance for everyone to come by and ask, well, you never mentioned this. What do you think of this? And sometimes I say, I have no idea. I don't have this, I don't have Paramount. I don't know how Paramount's going to look. I'm sorry.
Right. Herc, calibrated screens have more depth to me, like you're looking into the picture as opposed to at it. Could that be subjective?
I mean,
I don't know.
How you feel about what you're looking at is going to be subjective.
Yeah. So, and that's great.
At least
and,
in some context.
Yeah. And again, if calibration works for you and you've got the budget for it, then absolutely go for it, man. You're going to get the best performance out of your display possible. Aaron says, it's the FOMO period. What if it's better calibrated? What if I'm missing out? I've had them calibrated and had them not for what I and probably 99 point whatever percent of us do out of the box is ideal and perfect for him. Classy, never had a proper calibration with reference equipment, asked to be changed or not liked. Some calibrators don't do it correctly or have reference equipment.
Classy Tech Calibrations, I got news for you, man. I don't know you, you don't know me, but I know plenty of people who said to me that they've had a calibrator come in and they didn't want to hurt their feelings or do anything else, and they just reverted after they left. So they're not going to tell you. I'm not going to tell somebody who I just paid money that I don't like the calibration, but I'm going to switch it back afterwards if I don't like it.
Some people do.
Well, sure.
In the projector world, the biggest thing that we hear is, man, after calibration, I lost brightness.
Yeah.
And I actually like the brightness. I want that back. And so it's more accurate, but it's not what some people prefer. So, but yeah, I've heard it both ways for sure. Iceman, listen to what Classy Tech is saying, y'all. Okay. Siphonics Audio, good to see you. Are there any user-friendly consumer level calibration kits?
So I was thinking about the Apple TV. You can use your iPhone with it to calibrate it, but you can't do it with projector, so I haven't tried it. Does it not work good?
I don't know. We should test that actually. We should.
That'd be fun.
That would be a cool thing for
That
M-Wave.
would be
Good.
awesome. That'd be a cool experience at M-Wave.
We should see how accurate that is.
One is calibrated with your super fancy thousands of dollars calibrator, and one is calibrated with Apple TV. Same exact TV. Which one is which?
Oh,
There you go.
that'd be interesting, Ryan.
We need to do that beforehand.
Do a dry run or test run.
Well, I want to see if it's worth it. I mean, if it's not worth it, then I could do it on my two C2s or C3s at home just to
Interesting.
see.
Yeah, interesting. So going back to his point, consumer-friendly video calibration kits. What are we talking about? And maybe what are the pros and cons of that? Because I know that Nick came down and he used a Spider X to calibrate my previous NZ7 from JVC. I'm sorry, NX7 from JVC. And a lot of people said, yeah, I mean, it's good for, is it luminance? But it's not good for color, or maybe the opposite, something like that. They basically said they say, yeah, it's decent for this because it's only a couple $100. But if you really want it to look good, you're gonna have to use something higher than that for this other part of it. But I'm not a TV calibrator.
Correct. It depends on the display. I mean, for TVs, Spider X I think is okay for getting into. Laser. The professional calibrators are going to need to weigh in on
And I'm not
why
sure
and why not. I'm not the
Siphonic,
correct one
if
to
you're
answer that
referring to
question.
TVs or projectors, and one may do better for one than the other. Yeah, see, like Don Horizon Home Theater says Spider X for JVC, but again, it's got some limitations. So I mean, if you want a good calibration, you're probably going to have to spend some good money on that, unfortunately. Be nice. This conversation would be nice to have with calibrators. Okay, we already hit that one.
We already hit that one.
Yeah, we did that verbally. Grave Danger, when we'll be able to calibrate just using our smartphone cameras?
Kind of already can.
Kinda have
Sort of.
that. Yeah.
Doesn't do it well, but Samsung has their app, and TCL had it.
Yeah.
The problem is the sensitivity of your camera sensor. I mean, we're talking about your camera taking a picture of the TV compared to what, Jetty, $12,000, $10,000 special sensor device that you put against the TV to measure to the upteenth percent. So your camera might get you to a certain level for D65, which is all it's trying to do. They're not making any other adjustment. They're just hoping to get you close to D65. But a calibrator does so much more individual color, and so the cameras are not designed for that. You can't put your camera up to a TV in that way. So
Well, and the camera may do okay on a TV, and by okay I mean I don't know because I've never done it. But when you get into a laser projector, you're not going to have the granularity to be able to do what you need to with the light. Like D Nice just said, you really need at least 4.5 nanometer spectro to profile a calorimeter for your JVC. So those are the kinds of features that you're getting with the higher end gear that you fall short with on the more entry level consumer stuff.
Yeah, but okay. So we need to do this because I'm curious, right? We
I'm
were talking
curious
earlier,
too.
like a DE. Somebody mentioned in the comments, hey, my TV had a DE of 2.5. I got it calibrated now. It has a DE of 1.5. So it made a little improvement. But that's not going to be noticeable according to Fomo because he said you got to be like the RT Insight said you got to be about 3 different to notice a difference.
and then it's scene to scene specific too, right? It's like a correct green grass versus an incorrect green grass. You have to put a special face, a certain skin tone, and is it off because of green? Is it off because of blue? It's and this is ratings position. If it's under 3%, don't worry about it. That's kind of like they're published, but they try to get as accurate as possible. But they say when it's between less than 3%, most people will not notice the difference. And that side by side, you probably will. How many people are going to have it side by side to a reference monitor as well? So
Right.
yeah, absolutely. That's
And then
that's
extrapolate the question out. How close do these get? What's the DE on a phone? Like an iPhone camera is not a cheap junk. It's quantity of scale, and it's probably $300-400 camera. The Color Monkey people are using a couple $100. I don't know that this is going to be. I don't know. Just logically, I don't know that this is going to be a worse camera than a lesser quantity of scale, smaller manufactured company that's doing a calibration piece of gear. So curiosity, I think it'd be neat to see. How much difference is there? Yeah, okay, maybe it's more accurate with the color with the real calibration gear, but maybe this is good enough. Maybe. I don't know. I've never done it.
Yeah.
Just curious.
Don't know.
And especially if we did a blind comparison after
Wouldn't
we
that
did
be
it.
fun?
All right, Jonathan.
Like,
let's
what do you
get
like?
some time.
That'd be fun. Jonathan, you might ought to head that up at Emwave. That'd be fun, dude.
Well, I think
Like,
Jonathan and I
yeah.
should test it first to see if it's
Yeah?
even worthwhile.
Yeah, sure. So this is I'm actually skipping out of order just because I think it's a great thought here. Question is, what's the general ballpark? Are we talking like, say, because I know I've heard $500. I know some of them calibrate $1,500 or $3,000 because they're professionals. They've been doing this forever. They fly out to your home and they'll calibrate.
There you go. If you're in Alaska, probably $3,000. You got to fly out there. You're the only one they're calibrating. You got to put them up in a hotel.
But general ballpark, if somebody wanted to hire one of these guys,
Southern California, probably between $500 and $650. Just take inflation. I don't want to beat these guys up.
Yeah,
Starts
sure.
at $550.
Okay.
I'd say today, but this is compared to when I got it for $25 at Best Buy. And now I know it's only SDR, but the fact that they did it for $25, that's why they stopped doing it, right? I'd call them over and they do like 6 TVs. I paid Best Buy like under $200. And he was there all day. He's like, oh my God. But he didn't care. He was on the clock, right? And then 8 months later, they canceled the whole thing. I think I single-handedly pushed all the calibration services to their limit because I kept on calling them over to calibrate my TVs. It was great.
Yeah, Iceman said the phone calibrations don't do much. You can try it, but it really won't be worth it. Got a few
Yeah, but
more
that's
here.
being said by a calibrator. In all due respect, Iceman. I mean, you've been saying you're a calibrator in here, so I wouldn't expect to say anything other than that. I mean, just being honest.
Shots fired.
WKRP or WKR Piper in Cincinnati.
Hisense.
Fomo, what's your opinion? It's a Hisense, specifically the U8K 75-inch.
Excellent TV. Get it before they're sold out. The 85-inch is already sold out. So, for the other person who's asking about it, it's probably not available if they're looking at Best Buy. And that's been sold out for over a month now. 75-inch, I recommend it. I think it's a great TV. I like Hisense today. The U8K, the U7 series, excellent TVs for the money. And I say for the money because obviously if you pay a little bit more, Sony X95L and so forth. But the U8K, it punches above its weight. So the U8K 75-inch is like what, 1,200, 1,300 for a 75-inch. It justifies that price. It's good.
It's a lot of value.
I like it. Yeah.
And probably for the average consumer, the non-super enthusiast, they're going to be very pleased with that image.
Very pleased with it. Yeah.
Let's see, a couple more. Eddie picked up a LS 12,000 from Epson, planning on a 160-inch 69 screen. Is it possible to mask only one part of the screen, top or the bottom, not both?
Sure.
For 2.39 to 1 scope. Sorry for going off topic. No, this is totally on topic. We're good here, Eddie.
Yeah, that's totally possible. You just raise the overall image to the top, and then you would mask the bottom or lower it and mask the top. You don't have to keep it right in the middle when you're doing your overzoom.
And Jonathan, on the LS 12,000, I believe it has motorized zoom, so
Yes.
you can raise and lower the image. So
Correct.
what Jonathan's talking about, you go in the menu and you just say, okay, I want to slide this up to the top, and then you go into the masking section, and you've got 4-way masking. Left, top, right, and bottom. So then you would just mask the bottom off.
Yeah, the masking is kind of a pain in the butt, in my opinion. I mean, people do what they do, but if you got a DVD player or something that has like a little menu system at the bottom, or there's any kind of structure, it doesn't move it up. It's masked out. It's just not there.
Yeah.
So I personally don't end up using the masking for that reason.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of times before I got the Mad VR Envy, I would same thing what you're saying. When I would zoom out to my scope, the menu would be down like on my my entertainment center basically, and I'd have to like, oh man, okay,
But
I'm
you
kind of
can
making
see
out
it. I
for
mean,
it.
it's funny to see, but you can see it, right? Otherwise,
Yep.
it's just not there. You don't even know. You got nothing.
Exactly. Jonathan says, "What size do reference monitors come in?" Great question. Could that size, if not close to TV size, sway the choice? So the reference monitor that we're talking about possibly getting for M-Wave, what size is that?
They're not very big.
No,
So we're
32
talking like
inches.
30.
32 inches.
And they are
Yeah.
not cheap.
So a valid
Nope.
question, is that
You're
really
not
I-
going
okay.
to own a reference monitor as a TV.
no, I think he's saying like, would it sway?
I think he's saying if the size, if not close to a TV,
What's the point?
why would you buy a TV over a reference monitor is how I'm taking that question.
I guess I looked at it differently. It's like, I don't know, if it's smaller, would it sway my decision of when I'm looking at a big 100-inch TV that's non-calibrated next to a 32-inch calibrated? Is my perception of what I'm seeing not going to be?
You're getting into psychology there.
I don't know. So that was my thought. Carl says, "What are your thoughts on running a 9.4.6 with separates plus other video gear, only on 220 amp outlets? I'm aware of calculating watts down to 120 watts, but wanted to hear your opinion." Great question, Carl. So in my theater, I run technically 7.2.4. So I don't have a 9.4.6. I have one dedicated 20, and I've never had any issues at all. I would think, unless your speakers are just crazy inefficient, you've got massive amplifiers. I just have one big 11-channel amplifier from Monolith. It's 11X, and one does fine. I would think, and I would hope that 220 amps would be sufficient. But then you got somebody like Ryan that runs 30, 50 amp circuits to his room, and you still want more juice. And Tico's calling, going, "Dude, we ain't got enough power to send to your house, bro. Like, you're bankrupting us."
All in a day's work.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on that, though? I mean, if he's running just a standard 9.4.6, he's got separates, so he's got some, video gear, he's got some amplifiers for that.
I've got everything in my room on 220 amps that are dedicated, and that includes 4 6,000 iNuke amps. And that includes a DSP 3000 amp, a Crown XLS 802 amp, and 2 Crown 8300 amps. So split over 2 dedicated 20s. Point being, you're not going to have a trouble with that. And the reason you're not going to have trouble with that is most of the time your home theater is cruising on nothing, like just a couple, 3-4 watts in your normal listening, and it has those dynamic peaks that are much higher. But the dynamic peaks will pass through your breaker. Your breaker can pass 3 to 4 times its rated current temporarily. So if you got a 20 amp breaker, it can pass like 80 amps for a very short duration, and that very short duration matches up with dynamic peaks in music. So the only time you'll ever throw a breaker is if you are basically continually running it at like club volumes and allowing that dynamic to build up heat. And you're probably using way more than the amount on your breaker. You're probably using way more than 20 amps, but only in those peaks of the music. And it takes a while for the wire to heat up and the breakers trip on heat. So realistically, you have to have some just crazy stuff to throw breakers and be playing sine sweeps, that kind of stuff at low volume. Dubstep type music. The only time I've ever thrown a breaker in here was playing dubstep at like reference volume with the subs 15 dB hot. So, the kind of stuff where you're breaking things is when you could possibly throw a breaker with a lot of subs.
That's when it's fun.
Yeah. That's when it gets exciting. You start breaking a tile, Jonathan.
Yeah. We did throw a breaker there at that event too.
I bet.
We had all the subs plugged into 120 amp at that one, and it finally did break.
She said, I've reached my capacity. I'm done." Last question of the night, guys. Brain Guy says, is there a universal remote available that is as powerful and yet easy to program as the Harmony line was? Man, that is the age-old question. We're all waiting on that day. The only thing, and I've mentioned this many times, the only thing I see on the market currently that's consumer programmable, I don't know how easy it is to program because I haven't gotten one yet to review. It used to be called the YIO Remote 2, and they've rebranded the name. So now it's called Unfolded Circle Remote 2. They had like a Kickstarter program, and then they shipped them all to their the people that backed that project first. But I haven't heard a lot of feedback. I've reached out to them several times. They haven't sent me one, so I have no idea if that's going to be a good solution. The challenge for them, it's literally 2, 3 guys, 4 guys in the business, so they don't have the funds, they don't have the dev team that Harmony did. With Harmony, it was great because pretty much no matter what you bought, you just say, okay, I have this Marantz Cinema 10, and it goes, okay, boop, there's all the codes for it. For that, the Unfolded Circle Remote 2, probably a lot of those are going to be consumer. How do I explain that? The consumers are going to contribute to that database. So as consumers plug in the codes and the IR codes, it gets somehow maybe dumped into a database, but they said up front, they're like, we won't have this massive repository, I think is the word I'm trying to say. They don't have the massive repository that Harmony had, so I think, but it looks cool, I'll be honest, but it's also more expensive. It's like $450 US dollars. So
Buyer beware. Don't be an early adopter on that, unfortunately.
Well, and I want to talk about Harmony too. Do you guys not remember how much Harmony sucked?
I get frustrated with mine, I'll be honest with you. But in all fairness, it's the best thing.
Is
It was
it?
the best that we had available.
It's the
Is
best
it?
among the worst. The
It
best
was
among the
the best
worst.
we
But
had
the
available.
reason I'm saying that is because there really weren't very many options. You had URC, which is still
Again.
around. That was worse.
Yeah.
Like
was
looking
hard.
back at Harmony, the remotes were awful. I mean, they're
Yeah.
slow, they're unresponsive.
Yeah, I agree.
People say they're easy to program.
They are.
They can be, but
I
sometimes
think
the UI isn't, in a lot of the programming parts, isn't good. Their app was atrocious.
See, I
when
don't
it
think
came-
that at all.
When it came to the Harmony Hub,
No,
dude,
that
that
was
app is awful.
No, I like it. No, it made it easy for me because I can go in and I can change stuff. I can add.
No,
It's
I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the actual remote app. You never used it, did you?
Okay. That's your turn. I'm talking about just like programming. My
No, I
remote
mean,
with the app.
yeah,
Okay.
I mean that was okay, but I think we have a lot of this. What's the word I'm looking for? When something's old and we're thinking back on it. Nostalgia, right?
Yeah.
We have a lot of nostalgia about Harmony and thinking that, oh, it was so good, and I don't think it really was.
I have it now, and it's like the frustrating part for me. A couple things is, I'll scroll on my remote, and Harmony looks at me and goes, "What do you want me to do?" Oh, you want me to move, and then it'll scroll. I mean, I'm
But
used
by
to
that time, you maybe hit it again, and it's scrolling multiple
doing
times.
an activity. Yeah, it's like, so yeah, it's not that great, but for the average consumer, it was just easy to program.
Oh, yeah.
But sometimes you'll hit. It's not like a Control 4 where it works every time.
Okay, but even then, so here's what I've come to realize as a custom integrator is that no matter what remote is in the theater, that's the first thing that's going to be out of somebody's mouth is, my remote sucks. I want a new one. It doesn't matter if it's Harmony, Control 4, Crestron, Savant, RTI, any of them. It's, I hate it. Please fix it. You're going to hate whatever you put in here. So I think it's important for people to just try and put into context. And I don't think it's horrific, but just try and make sure that the bar is being properly set. Because if you think Harmony's up here and you haven't used it for a while, maybe go back and see what it's like to make sure we're comparing apples to apples.
That's fair.
I don't think it's as good as people say it is. And Some of those Harmony remotes were not cheap. I mean, they were like stupid expensive when you're talking about what was the Elite. How much
Well, the
was
Elite's what I have. It's $250, and I think most of the time it was. I guess when it first came out, it was about $250, but I think it eventually got down to either $2 or $150, somewhere
Did
around
it?
there. So, yeah,
Okay.
so it wasn't super
I
crazy.
guess I'm misremembering.
Yeah, no.
But how long ago was that?
I mean, the Elite's been around a while, dude. Probably I would say 10 years.
So if we take into how everything else is ballooned in price,
Yeah, true.
I mean, is a $400 remote really that out of the question when we're talking about 250 10 years ago? I don't know.
Yeah.
But there is no good option. They all suck.
Yeah. And a lot of guys, they're using CEC now to control, and sometimes that's a good option. There are some app programs. I forget the brand, but there's some that people use where they're set up.
What we've been using with CEC specifically is if you got an iPhone and an Apple TV, you just have the Apple TV turn on the TV and control it all on your phone. You got volume control, you can control everything, and then you don't really have a remote. I'm waiting on Ava. I know it's not end user controllable, but I'm interested to see how that all goes. I just want something that doesn't suck and I don't hate selling to people.
I think we're all looking for that product. So somebody out there's got to create it.
One day.
So some are trying to work on it. They're just not doing a great job at it. And so until then, or until we get, one of those remotes in hand and we can play with it, test it, see how well it is, and share that with you guys, we're all just kind of
I just deal with a table full of remotes. I've accepted my fate.
You masochist.
I don't do that. I can't do that. Yeah. So, well, Fomo, seriously, it's always a pleasure having you on, man. You provide a lot of wisdom. We're going to have a blast at M-Wave this year. Fomo and Brian are going to be heading up the TV room. So they're going to be doing a bunch of different TVs. Fomo, we got some bigger TVs coming this year, I think, right?
Yep, we're trying to get some 98-inch TVs from various brands. We don't know which they are yet, so I don't want to make any promises, but for sure, we're going to try to get the latest 98-inch TVs so they can have an experience, or 100, right? Either one. Yeah, 'cause it's going to be exciting. A lot of the TV brands are committed to affordable 98 and 100-inch TVs, and that's the key word. They're trying to keep everything under $7,000, depending on the brand, which I think is very important.
Okay. So one thing, you guys can sign up for the M-Wave newsletter. So I'll post, like, when Fomo gives me information. Eventually, what I told Fomo I'd love to have on the website once he I'll mess that up. Once he does know, some more details, I want to create a dedicated page for that so that we can kind of, let you know what you can expect in that room. But we've got a lot of stuff, a lot of fun stuff that we've got planned for M-Wave. So we'd love for you guys to join us June 21st to the 23rd in Kansas City, Missouri. Jonathan, it's been a blast. Ryan's always a pleasure. Fomo, you're welcome back anytime.
Thank you, my friends. All right.
All right, guys. Well, I hope y'all have an incredible week. We'll catch you in the next one.
Thanks, guys. Have a good one.
Night.